You are not your emotions. You are the observer of your emotions. And until you understand that distinction, your life will be a series of reactions you never chose to triggers you never saw coming. Someone cuts you off in traffic. Your boss sends a terse email. Your partner makes a comment that stings. And before you can think, you're angry, defensive, anxious, spiraling. You're not living your life. You're reacting to it. Cassian Grayland's The Power of Not Reacting is not about becoming a robot. It's about reclaiming your sovereignty. It's about installing a pause between stimulus and response, a space where you get to choose, not your amygdala, not your childhood programming, not your wounded ego. For the next 2 hours, you will learn the science, the psychology, and the practical techniques to master your emotional world. Not by suppressing feelings, by understanding them, befriending them, and placing them under your conscious command. The power of not reacting is the power of being truly free. Let's begin. Let's start from our chapter 1 that will unlock the reactive trap and why we react before we think. Let me tell you about a tiny organ in your brain that has been running your life without your permission. It's called the amygdala, 2 almond-shaped clusters of neurons deep in your temporal lobe. And its only job is to keep you alive. Not happy, not peaceful, not successful, alive. When your amygdala perceives a threat, and it perceives threats everywhere, it hijacks your entire nervous system in milliseconds. Before you can think, before you can choose, before you can breathe, you are flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. Your heart pounds, your muscles tense, your vision narrows. Your prefrontal cortex, the thinking, reasoning, choosing part of your brain, goes offline. This is the reactive trap, and you're caught in it dozens of times a day. Someone cuts you off in traffic. Your amygdala screams, threat. Before you can think, you're honking, shouting, your blood pressure spiking. Over a minor inconvenience. Your boss sends a terse email. Your amygdala screams, danger, social rejection, pack exile. Before you can think, you're anxious, spiraling, drafting angry responses you'll never send. Over an email. Your partner makes a comment that stings. Your amygdala screams, attack, defend, fight back. Before you can think, you're snapping, defensive, escalating a conversation that didn't need to be a conflict. Over a few words. This is biology. It's not weakness. It's not a character flaw. It's your brain doing exactly what it evolved to do. Prioritize survival over everything else. The problem is, your amygdala can't tell the difference between a saber-toothed tiger and a passive-aggressive text. It treats both as life or death emergencies. You have a choice. Stay a slave to this ancient wiring, or understand it, work with it, and reclaim your sovereignty. That's the key. Let's look at the cost of constant reactivity. Think about your relationships. How many arguments could have been avoided if you'd paused for 3 seconds? How many hurtful words have you said in the heat of the moment? Words you spent days or weeks trying to take back. The person who reacts is a puppet, dancing on strings pulled by anyone who pushes their buttons. The person who pauses is the puppeteer. Which one do you want to be? Think about your career. How many decisions have you made from panic instead of strategy? How many emails have you sent that you later regretted? How many opportunities for promotion were lost because you were seen as volatile or hard to work with? Reactivity costs you money. It costs you respect. It costs you advancement. Think about your health. Chronic reactivity means chronic stress. Chronic stress means elevated cortisol. Elevated cortisol means inflammation, weight gain, weakened immune system, heart disease, anxiety, depression. Your reactivity is quite literally killing you. Slowly, daily. Think about your peace. The reactive person lives in a constant state of emergency. Everything is a crisis. Every comment is an attack. Every setback is a catastrophe. They are exhausted, overwhelmed, and perpetually on edge. They have no peace. None. This is the reactive trap, and it's the default setting for most humans. But here's the truth that changes everything. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is your power. Read that again. Let it land. Between the thing that happens and what you do about it, there is a gap. A millisecond. A breath. A pause. In that tiny window, you have a choice. You can react automatically from your ancient wiring and live with the consequences. Or you can respond deliberately from your conscious mind and live with intention. This is the foundational distinction of this entire book, reaction versus response. Reaction is automatic. It's emotional. It's fast. It's the amygdala in charge. And it's almost always something you regret later. The angry text, the sharp word, the impulsive decision, the panic cell. Reaction is the puppet dancing. Response is chosen. It's thoughtful. It's slower. It's the prefrontal cortex back in the driver's seat. It's aligned with your values, your goals, your best self. The person who responds is the puppeteer. Your goal is not to stop feeling. That's impossible. That's not even desirable. Your emotions are data. They tell you important things about your world. Fear says pay attention. Anger says a boundary was crossed. Sadness says something was lost. These are signals. They're not the problem. The problem is when the signal becomes the commander. When the emotion bypasses your conscious mind and goes straight to action. When you're not living your life, you're reacting to it. It's not about not feeling. It's about choosing your response. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can learn to create space. You can train yourself to pause. You can reclaim the gap between stimulus and response. And in that gap, you will find your freedom. Let me give you a real-world example. Two people get the same critical email. Person A reads it and immediately feels the heat in their chest. The amygdala hijacks. They fire back a defensive, angry response. Hit send. 10 minutes later, they regret it. They've damaged a relationship, maybe a career opportunity, all because they couldn't pause for 10 seconds. Person B reads the same email. They feel the heat. They notice it. They say to themselves, "Ah, there's the amygdala. Interesting." They take a breath. They close the email and go for a walk. 20 minutes later, they come back, read it again with a clear head, and craft a thoughtful, professional response. They've protected the relationship. They've shown emotional maturity. They've chosen their response. Same stimulus, different outcome. The only difference was the pause. You have that same power. It's not magic. It's neurobiology. And it's trainable. Your first action, starting right now. Step 1. Name the hijack. When you feel that surge of emotion, the heat, the tension, the urge to act, say to yourself, amygdala hijack in progress. Just name it. This simple act of labeling activates your prefrontal cortex and begins to restore your conscious control. You can't stop the hijack from happening, but you can shorten it. Naming it is the first step. Step 2. Create a physical pause. When you feel triggered, do something physical that interrupts the momentum. Take a deep breath. Stand up. Walk to the window. Count to 5. Feel your feet on the floor. These micro pauses are circuit breakers. They give your thinking brain a chance to catch up. Step 3. Ask the choice question. Once you've paused, ask yourself, what response serves my highest self right now? Not, what do I feel like doing? That's the amygdala talking. Not, what would make them pay? That's revenge. What response serves my highest self? This question reconnects you with your values. It puts you back in the driver's seat. Step 4. Practice on small things. You can't train for a crisis in a crisis. You build the pause muscle on small things. The slow internet, the long line, the cold coffee. Practice pausing before you react to minor annoyances. Each time, you strengthen the neural pathway. Each time, you make the gap bigger. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is your power. This is the foundation of everything to come. The pause, the gap, the choice. It's not complicated, but it's not easy. It requires practice. It requires awareness. It requires a commitment to becoming the master of your own emotional world. You can do this. You are strong. You are intelligent. You are the master of your own world, not the victim of your wiring. Now, with this foundation laid, we must go deeper. We must understand exactly what we're dealing with. What are emotions, really? Where do they come from? Why do they feel so powerful? And how can we work with them instead of against them? We need to understand the science. Moving to Chapter 2, the science of emotion, understanding what you're dealing with. And if you're ready to reclaim the space between stimulus and response, hit subscribe. It's a small act of intention, a choice to keep building that pause muscle week by week. Every video is a practice session. Every lesson is a rep. Build the gap. Own your power. Subscribe now. It's time for the Chapter 2, the science of emotion, understanding what you're dealing with. Let me ask you a question. When you feel angry, what is that really? A sensation in your chest? Heat in your face? A tightening of your jaw? When you feel anxious, what's happening? A racing heart? Shallow breath? Butterflies in your stomach? These are not abstract concepts. They are physical events. Chemistry, biology, your body talking to your brain in a language older than words. And once you understand that, everything changes. Emotions are not enemies. They are data. Say that again. Emotions are not enemies. They are data. They are signals from your body and brain, trying to tell you something important about your world. Your job is not to eliminate them. Your job is to learn to read the signal without being consumed by the noise. Let's break down the basic emotional vocabulary. Fear. What is fear telling you? Threat. Danger. Something to pay attention to. Fear is your ancient alarm system, screaming, "Pay attention." It might be a real threat, a car swerving toward you. Or it might be a perceived threat, a difficult conversation, a financial worry, a social situation. The signal is the same. The interpretation is up to you. Anger. What is anger telling you? Boundary violation. Injustice. Something you care about has been crossed or threatened. Anger is your protector. It gives you energy to defend, to fight, to stand up. The problem isn't anger. The problem is what you do with it. Sadness. What is sadness telling you? Loss. Something important is gone. A relationship, an opportunity, a version of yourself. Sadness asks for rest, for reflection, for connection. It slows you down so you can process. Joy. What is joy telling you? Safety, connection, alignment. This is good. More of this. Joy is your brain's way of saying, "This works." Keep going. Disgust. What is disgust telling you? Avoid. This is harmful. Stay away. It protects you from things that could hurt you, physically or morally. Each emotion is a messenger. Each one carries valuable information. The problem is, we've been taught to shoot the messenger, to suppress, ignore, or fight our feelings. We treat emotions as problems to be solved rather than data to be understood. You have a choice. Fight your emotions and lose every time. Or befriend them, understand them, and use their information wisely. That's the key. Now let's go deeper. Let's talk about the chemistry. Every emotion you feel is accompanied by a cocktail of chemicals flooding your system. These chemicals create the physical sensations you call feeling. Cortisol, the stress hormone, released when your amygdala perceives a threat. It increases blood sugar, suppresses non-essential functions, and prepares your body for action. In short bursts, it's protective. Chronically elevated, it destroys you. Cortisol is why you feel that knot in your stomach, that tension in your shoulders, that sense of being on edge. Adrenaline, the fight or flight chemical, released in response to stress or excitement. It increases heart rate, dilates airways, and sends blood to your muscles. It's why you feel that rush, that energy, that urge to move. Adrenaline is why your palms sweat and your heart pounds. Dopamine, the reward chemical, released when you anticipate or experience something pleasurable. It motivates you to seek rewards, food, sex, social approval, achievements. Dopamine is why you check your phone obsessively, why you crave likes, why you're addicted to the next hit of good news. It's also why you feel let down when the reward doesn't come. Oxytocin, the connection chemical, released during bonding activities, hugging, sex, breastfeeding, even petting a dog. It promotes trust, attachment, and calm. Oxytocin is why you feel warm and safe with loved ones. It's the antidote to cortisol. Serotonin, the mood regulator, influences sleep, appetite, and overall sense of well-being. Low serotonin is linked to depression and anxiety. High serotonin, within normal ranges, is linked to calm, confidence, and contentment. These chemicals are not you. They are not your identity. They are not your destiny. They are biology. And biology can be understood, managed, and influenced. When you feel a surge of anger, it's not a moral failure. It's adrenaline and cortisol flooding your system because your amygdala detected a boundary violation. When you feel a wave of anxiety, it's not a sign you're broken. It's your body preparing for a perceived threat, whether that threat is real or imagined. When you feel sad, it's not weakness. It's your system processing loss, asking for rest and connection. When you understand its chemistry, you stop personalizing it. You stop saying, "I am angry," and start saying, "I am experiencing the chemistry of anger." You stop saying, "I am anxious," and start saying, "My body is in a stress response." This tiny shift in language creates distance, and distance creates choice. This brings us to one of the most liberating discoveries in modern neuroscience, the 90-second rule. Neuroanatomist Jill Bolt Taylor, after studying her own stroke and recovery, made a profound observation. She wrote, "When a person has a reaction to something in their environment, there's a 90-second chemical process that happens in the body. After that, any remaining emotional response is just the person choosing to stay in that emotional loop." 90 seconds. That's it. The chemical lifespan of an emotion, the time it takes for the cortisol and adrenaline to flush out of your system, is approximately 90 seconds. After that, you're not feeling the emotion anymore. You're thinking it. You're feeding it. You're keeping it alive with your own thoughts. Think about that. The actual feeling, the physical sensation, lasts less than 2 minutes. Everything after that is a story you're telling yourself, a loop you're choosing to stay in. You get angry at your partner. The chemicals surge. Your body heats up. Your heart races. That's the feeling. 90 seconds later, the chemicals are gone. But you're still angry. Why? Because you're replaying the offense in your mind. Because you're imagining what you should have said. Because you're building a case for your righteousness. You're not feeling the emotion. You're thinking it, feeding it, keeping it alive. Feel it for 90 seconds. Then let it go. This is your new mantra. When an emotion arises, you don't suppress it. You don't fight it. You don't judge it. You feel it, fully, for 90 seconds. You let the chemicals do their work. You notice the sensations, the heat, the tension, the racing heart. You breathe into them. You let them be there. And then, after 90 seconds, you ask, is there still something here? Or am I just thinking about it now? If there's still something, a real issue to address, a boundary to assert, a loss to grieve, you respond from your conscious mind, not your reactive chemistry. You choose. If it's just the story, the loop, the replay, the self-righteous narrative, you let it go. You release it. You return to peace. This is not suppression. This is processing. This is working with your biology instead of against it. Let me give you a practical example. You're in a meeting. A colleague says something dismissive about your work. You feel the heat rise. The anger surges. That's the 90-second window. Old you would have snapped back immediately, reacting from the chemistry, saying something you'd regret. New you notices. You feel the heat. You feel the urge to strike back. You breathe. You say to yourself, 90 seconds. Just feel it. You stay present with the sensation. You don't act on it. You don't feed it with stories. 90 seconds pass. The chemicals subside. You're still in the meeting. Your colleague is still wrong. But now you can respond, not react. You can calmly say, I see it differently. Let me share my perspective. Or you can let it go entirely, knowing it's not worth the energy. You've used the science. You've worked with your biology. You've reclaimed your power. Feel it for 90 seconds. Then let it go. This single practice will transform your life. Not because emotions stop happening, because you stop being their slave, because you learn to ride the wave instead of being crushed by it. Your action protocol for this chapter. Step 1. Map your body. When an emotion arises, notice where you feel it physically. Is the anger in your jaw? Your shoulders? Your chest? Is the anxiety in your stomach? Your throat? Your racing heart? Create a body map of your emotions. This builds the observer muscle. Step 2. Name the chemistry. When you feel a strong emotion, say to yourself, this is cortisol and adrenaline. Or this is a dopamine craving. Or this is oxytocin flowing. Depersonalize it. It's just chemistry. Step 3. Set a 90-second timer. When you're triggered, consciously give yourself 90 seconds. Breathe. Feel. Don't act. Don't think. Just be with the sensation. You can literally set a timer on your phone if you need to. After 90 seconds, reassess. Step 4. Separate signal from story. After 90 seconds, ask, is there a real signal here? A boundary violated, a loss to grieve, a threat to address? Or is this just the story I'm telling myself? If there's a signal, respond from choice. If it's just story, let it go. Feel it for 90 seconds. Then let it go. This is not about becoming numb. It's about becoming conscious. It's about working with your biology instead of being run by it. It's about taking the information your emotions provide and using it wisely, not automatically. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can learn to read your own signals. You can learn to ride the chemical waves. You can learn to separate the messenger from the message. Now, with this understanding of the science, we need a practical tool. Something you can use in the moment. when the chemicals are surging and your thinking brain has gone offline. Something that interrupts the hijack and gives you back your choice. We need to master the pause. Moving to Chapter 3, the pause, your most powerful tool. And if you're ready to stop fighting your emotions and start understanding them, hit subscribe. Every week, more science, more tools, more practices for the person who's done being a puppet. You're not just listening, you're training. Subscribe now. Chapter 3 unlocks the pause, your most powerful tool. Let me tell you about the most powerful tool you will ever own. It's not a technique. It's not a mantra. It's not a breathing exercise. It's simpler and harder than all of those. It's the pause. When you are triggered, when the amygdala hijacks, when the chemicals surge, when the urge to react rises like a wave, the first thing you do is nothing. You stop. You don't speak. You don't move. You don't act. You just stop. You create space. A millisecond of nothing between the stimulus and your response. This single habit changes everything. The pause is not weakness. It's the ultimate strength. Think about that. In a world that rewards speed, that demands instant responses, that confuses quickness with intelligence, choosing to pause is an act of rebellion. It's saying, I will not be controlled by my impulses. I will not be a puppet. I will choose. The person who cannot pause is a slave to every trigger. The person who masters the pause is sovereign. You have a choice. Be the puppet or be the puppeteer. That's the key. Let me explain why the pause works. When you're triggered, your amygdala has hijacked your nervous system. Your prefrontal cortex, the thinking, choosing part of your brain, has gone offline. In that state, you cannot make good decisions. You cannot access your values. You cannot be your best self. You can only react. The pause is the circuit breaker. It interrupts the hijack. It gives your prefrontal cortex a chance to come back online. Even a fraction of a second of pause can be enough to shift from reaction to response. Think of it like this. Your amygdala is a fire alarm. When it goes off, you don't immediately run into the burning building. You pause. You assess. You decide whether it's a real fire or just burnt toast. The pause is what separates the person who runs blindly from the person who acts wisely. Now, let's get practical. How do you create a pause in the heat of the moment? You need micro-practices. Simple, concrete actions you can take in the split second between trigger and response. These are not cliches. They are neurological circuit breakers. They work. Micro-practice 1. Count to 5. When you feel the surge, start counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Out loud if you can, silently if you must. Counting activates your prefrontal cortex. It pulls you out of the reactive brain and into the thinking brain. By the time you reach 5, you've created enough space to choose. Micro-practice 2. Feel your feet. Shift your attention to the soles of your feet. Feel them against the floor. Feel the ground beneath you. This anchors you in your body, in the present moment. It pulls you out of the mental spin and into physical reality. You can't be caught in a reactive loop when you're fully present in your feet. Micro-practice 3. Take one deep breath. Inhale slowly through your nose. Hold for a moment. Exhale slowly through your mouth. One breath. That's all it takes. Breath is the direct line to your nervous system. A single deep breath activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the brake pedal. It calms the hijack. Micro-practice 4. Name what's happening. Say to yourself, I'm being triggered, or there's the anger, or amygdala hijack in progress. Naming creates distance. Distance creates choice. You can't be completely lost in an emotion if you're also labeling it. These micro-practices take less than 3 seconds. 3 seconds to reclaim your sovereignty. 3 seconds to choose response over reaction. 3 seconds to become the master of your own world. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can learn to pause. But here's the critical insight. You cannot learn to pause in a crisis. You don't train for the marathon by running the marathon on race day. You train for months on easy runs, building the muscle, conditioning the body. Then, when race day comes, you're ready. The pause is the same. You must train it in low-stakes situations so it's available in high-stakes ones. This is where most people fail. They wait until they're in a full-blown emotional crisis to try pausing for the first time. And it doesn't work. The wave is too big. The hijack is too strong. They've never built the muscle. You need to practice when it doesn't matter. When the stakes are low. When the consequences are small. Practice when the coffee is late. You're waiting in line. The barista is slow. You feel the irritation rising. That's your training ground. Pause. Count to 5. Feel your feet. Take a breath. Watch the urge to complain rise and fall. You've just done a rep. Practice when the internet is slow. The video buffers. The page won't load. The frustration builds. Pause. Count. Breathe. Feel. You've just done another rep. Practice when someone cuts you off in traffic. The surge of anger. The urge to honk. Pause. Breathe. Let it pass. Another rep. Practice when your partner leaves dishes in the sink. The familiar irritation. The story about how they never help. Pause. Breathe. Choose. Another rep. Each small pause is a repetition. Each repetition strengthens the neural pathway. Each strengthening makes the pause more available when it really matters. By the time you face a true crisis, a job loss, a relationship rupture, a health scare, you won't have to think about pausing. It will be automatic. You'll have built the muscle through thousands of small reps. The pause is not weakness. It's the ultimate strength. Let me give you a real-world example. Sarah was known for her temper. At work, she'd snap at colleagues. At home, she'd yell at her kids. She'd always regret it later. But in the moment, she couldn't stop herself. She was a puppet, and everyone around her was pulling the strings. She started practicing the pause in small moments. When her coffee was wrong, when traffic was bad, when her husband left the toilet seat up, she'd pause, count to 5, breathe, feel her feet. It felt ridiculous at first. This is too simple, she thought. This can't possibly work. But she kept at it. Day after day, rep after rep. 6 months later, her boss criticized her work in a meeting. Old Sarah would have exploded. New Sarah felt the surge, and then paused. Counted to 5, breathed, felt her feet. By the time she spoke, she was calm. She said, "I hear your feedback. Let me think about it and get back to you." Her boss was stunned. Her colleagues were impressed. Sarah was free. The pause didn't change her boss. It changed Sarah. It gave her back her power. You are not Sarah, but you have the same biology, the same amygdala, the same capacity to train. Your action protocol for this chapter. Step 1. Identify your low-stakes triggers. Make a list of minor annoyances that happen regularly. The slow internet, the long line, the cold coffee, the driver who doesn't use their turn signal. These are your practice opportunities. Write them down so you remember to use them. Step 2. Choose your micro-practice. Pick 1 or 2 pause techniques that resonate with you. Counting to 5. Feeling your feet. Taking a breath. Naming the emotion. Start with just 1. Master it before adding others. Step 3. Commit to 10 reps per day. Every day, for the next week, commit to pausing on at least 10 small triggers. 10 reps, that's all. By the end of the week, you'll have done 70 reps. You'll have started building the muscle. Step 4. Celebrate every pause. When you pause successfully, even on something tiny, acknowledge it. Say to yourself, "Good job. I just built strength." This positive reinforcement trains your brain to repeat the behavior. You're not just building a habit. You're building an identity as someone who pauses. The pause is not weakness. It's the ultimate strength. Say it again. The pause is not weakness. It's the ultimate strength. The world will tell you to react, to fire back, to defend yourself, to let them have it. That's not strength. That's reflex. That's the puppet dancing. True strength is the ability to stop, to breathe, to choose, to respond from your highest self instead of your wounded ego. That strength is available to you right now, in this moment. All it takes is 1 pause. You are the master of your own world, not your amygdala, not your triggers, not the people who push your buttons. You. And the pause is how you claim that mastery. Now, with the pause installed as your primary tool, we need to deepen your ability to observe. Because pausing creates space. But what do you do with that space? How do you use it wisely? We need to cultivate the art of mindful observation. Moving to Chapter 4, Mindfulness, the art of observing without judging. And if you're ready to build the pause muscle and stop being a puppet to every trigger, hit subscribe. Every video is a training rep. Every lesson is a chance to strengthen the neural pathway. You're not just listening. You're building the most important skill of your life. Subscribe now. Let's train together. Chapter 4 discovers mindfulness, the art of observing without judging. Who are you? Not your name, not your job, not your roles, not your history, not your thoughts, not your feelings. Who is the one who notices all of that? Right now, as you listen to these words, there is a part of you that is aware. aware of the sound of my voice, aware of the thoughts forming in your mind, aware of any sensations in your body, aware of emotions that may arise. That awareness, that's the real you, not the thoughts, not the feelings, the one who observes the thoughts and feelings. This is the foundation of mindfulness, and it is the most important skill you will ever develop for emotional mastery. Mindfulness is not meditation on a cushion. It's not about becoming a monk or escaping the world. It's about learning to observe your inner experience without being consumed by it. It's the practice of watching your thoughts and feelings like clouds passing through the sky, without climbing onto every cloud and being carried away. You are the sky, not the weather. Say that again. You are the sky, not the weather. The weather changes. Storms come. Winds blow. Rain falls. Sun shines. The sky remains. Vast. Open. Unchanged. Your emotions are the weather. Anger is a thunderstorm. Sadness is a gray drizzle. Anxiety is a swirling wind. Joy is a warm, sunny day. They come. They go. They change. And through it all, you, the observer, the sky, remain. When you mistake yourself for the weather, you suffer. You say, I am angry instead of I am noticing anger. You say, I am anxious instead of there is anxiety present. You become fused with the temporary state and you lose your freedom. When you know yourself as the sky, everything changes. You can watch the storm rage without being destroyed by it. You can let the feelings move through you without being defined by them. You gain perspective. You gain space. You gain choice. You are not the storm. You are the sky that holds it. This is the heart of mindfulness. Not emptying your mind. Not achieving some special state. Just remembering who you really are. Let's get practical. How do you cultivate this observing capacity in everyday life? You need simple, accessible practices. Things you can do while waiting in line, while stuck in traffic, while sitting in a meeting. Practices that build the muscle of observation. Practice 1. Watch your breath. This is the simplest and most powerful practice. For a few moments, bring your attention to your breath. Don't try to change it. Just notice it. The sensation of air entering your nostrils. The rise of your chest. The fall of your belly. The pause between breaths. When your mind wanders, and it will, gently bring it back. No judgment. Just noticing. This is a rep. You're building the muscle of attention. Practice 2. Notice sensations. Throughout the day, check in with your body. What do you feel right now? The weight of your body in the chair. The temperature of the air on your skin. Any tension in your shoulders or jaw. Just notice. Name it silently if it helps. Tension. Warmth. Pressure. This anchors you in the present moment. It pulls you out of mental spirals and into physical reality. Practice 3. Label your thoughts. When thoughts arise, and they will, simply label them. Thinking, planning, worrying, remembering, judging. Don't engage with the content. Don't follow the story. Just notice the thought as an event in the mind, then let it go. This creates distance. You're no longer lost in the thought. You're observing it. That's the difference between being in the movie and watching the movie. Practice 4. Name your emotions. When emotions arise, do the same. Anger, fear, sadness, joy, frustration. Just name them. Notice where you feel them in your body. Notice how they change. Don't judge them as good or bad. Just observe. This is the 90-second rule in action. You're letting the emotion be there without feeding it with stories. You're letting it pass through. Practice 5. The daily pause. Set aside 2 minutes each day, just 2 minutes, to sit in silence and observe. No phone, no music, no distractions, just you and your breath. Notice what arises. Thoughts, feelings, sensations. Watch them come and go. This is your daily practice. This is how you build the sky. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can learn to observe. Let me give you a real-world example. Michael was a chronic overthinker. His mind never stopped. He'd lie awake at night, replaying conversations, imagining worst-case scenarios, spiraling into anxiety. He knew his thoughts were irrational, but he couldn't stop them. He was fused with his thinking mind. He started practicing mindfulness. Not hours of meditation, just small moments throughout the day. While waiting for his coffee, he'd watch his breath. While stuck in traffic, he'd notice sensations. When anxious thoughts arose, he'd label them, worrying, and let them go. At first, nothing changed. The thoughts kept coming, but he kept practicing. After a few weeks, something shifted. He noticed a gap, a tiny space between the thought arising and his engagement with it. In that space, he had a choice. He could follow the thought into the spiral, or he could let it pass. He started choosing to let it pass more often. Not always, but more often. The sky was getting wider. The storms still came, but they didn't destroy him anymore. Michael discovered what you're discovering now. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who notices your thoughts. You are not the storm. You are the sky that holds it. This is not philosophy. It's neurobiology. When you practice mindfulness, you strengthen the prefrontal cortex, the observing, choosing part of your brain. You weaken the amygdala's grip. You literally rewire your brain for emotional balance. The science is clear. 8 weeks of mindfulness practice changes the structure of your brain, reduces amygdala size, increases gray matter in the prefrontal cortex. You are not stuck with the brain you have. You can train it. You can change it. Your action protocol for this chapter. Step 1. Start with 1 minute. Don't try to meditate for 20 minutes. You won't stick with it. Start with 1 minute. Set a timer. Sit. Watch your breath. That's it. Do this every day for a week. 1 minute. Build the habit before you build the duration. Step 2. Use micro moments. Throughout the day, use small moments as practice. Waiting for the microwave? Watch your breath for 3 cycles. Stuck at a red light? Notice sensations. About to respond to an email? Pause and observe. These micro moments add up. Step 3. Label without judgment. When thoughts or emotions arise, label them neutrally. Thinking, worrying, anger. Don't judge yourself for having them. Don't try to make them stop. Just notice. Let them be. Let them pass. Step 4. Remember the sky. When you're caught in a storm, angry, anxious, overwhelmed, pause and ask, who is noticing this? The answer is the sky, the observer, the real you. Let that remembrance create space. Let it remind you that the storm is not who you are. You are not the storm. You are the sky that holds it. This is the practice. Not perfection, just practice. Some days the sky will be clear. Some days the storms will rage. Through it all, you remain vast, open, aware. And that awareness is your freedom. Now, with the observing self awakened, we need a tool that works when observation isn't enough. When the storm is too loud and the sky feels distant. When you need something physical, immediate, undeniable. We need to master the breath. Moving to Chapter 5, Breathing, the body's emergency brake. And if you're ready to discover who you really are, the sky, not the storm, hit subscribe. Every week, more practices for the observer. More tools for the sky. You're not just learning about mindfulness. You're building it. One breath, one pause, one moment at a time. Subscribe now. The sky is waiting. Our next chapter is Chapter 5, Breathing, the body's emergency brake. Let me tell you about the most powerful tool you already have. You don't need to buy it. You don't need to learn it. You don't need to travel to a monastery to find it. It's with you right now, at this very moment. It's your breath. Every single emotion you experience is accompanied by a change in your breathing. When you're anxious, your breath becomes shallow and rapid. When you're angry, your breath becomes sharp and forceful. When you're sad, your breath becomes slow and heavy. When you're calm, your breath is deep and even. Here's what most people don't know. The relationship goes both ways. Your emotional state affects your breath, but your breath also affects your emotional state. Change your breath, and you change your nervous system. It's the fastest, most direct route to emotional regulation. When in doubt, breathe. Your nervous system is listening. Say that again. When in doubt, breathe. Your nervous system is listening. This is not new age fluff. This is hard neuroscience. Your breath is the only automatic bodily function you can also control voluntarily. It's the bridge between your conscious mind and your autonomic nervous system. Pull on that bridge, and the other side moves. Let's understand the physiology. Your nervous system has 2 main branches: the sympathetic, fight or flight, and the parasympathetic, rest and digest. When you're triggered, your sympathetic nervous system takes over. Heart races, muscles tense, breath quickens. You're ready to fight or run. Your breath is the key to activating the parasympathetic system, the brake. Long, slow, deep exhalations specifically trigger the vagus nerve, which tells your body, we're safe. We can calm down. This is why every wisdom tradition on earth has emphasized breath. Not because it's mystical, because it works. You have a choice. Stay at the mercy of your triggered nervous system. Or learn to use your breath as the emergency brake it was designed to be. That's the key. Let me give you specific techniques. These are not suggestions. They are protocols. Use them. Technique 1. Box breathing 4-4-4-4. This is the technique used by Navy SEALs, by Special Forces, by people who need to stay calm while the world is exploding around them. Inhale through your nose for a count of 4. Hold your breath for a count of 4. Exhale through your mouth for a count of 4. Hold your empty lungs for a count of 4. Repeat for 1 to 5 minutes. That's it. For counts in, 4 holds, 4 out, 4 holds. The box. The rhythm. It forces your nervous system to sync with a slow, deliberate pattern. It interrupts the hijack. It brings you back online. Technique 2. Extended exhale 4 to 8. This one focuses on the exhale, which is the most powerful part of the breath for activating calm. Inhale through your nose for a count of 4. Exhale slowly through your mouth for a count of 8. Repeat for 1 to 5 minutes. The longer exhale directly stimulates the vagus nerve. It tells your body, we're safe. We can rest. It's like pressing the brake pedal while your sympathetic system is flooring the gas. Technique 3. The physiological sigh. This one is built into your biology. Animals do it naturally to reset their nervous systems. So do humans, when we're not too busy reacting to notice. Take a double inhale through your nose. Sip in as much as you can, then sip in just a little more. Exhale slowly and completely through your mouth. Repeat 1 to 3 times. This technique rapidly drops your heart rate and calms your nervous system. It's the body's built-in reset button. Use it. These are not complicated. They don't require years of practice. They require intention. They require remembering, in the heat of the moment, that you have a tool. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can learn to breathe with intention. Now, here's the critical insight. Don't wait for the crisis. If you only use these techniques when you're already triggered, you're trying to learn to swim in a hurricane. It's possible, but it's much harder than it needs to be. You need a daily breathing practice. Not for crisis, for maintenance. Think about it this way. You don't brush your teeth only when you have a cavity. You brush every day to prevent cavities. Your breath is the same. You don't breathe with intention only when you're panicking. You practice daily so that when panic comes, the breath is already your friend. Just as you brush your teeth daily, you breathe daily. Do it with intention. When in doubt, breathe. Your nervous system is listening. Let me give you a real-world example. Jennifer was a high-powered executive. She was good at her job, but she paid a price. Her stress levels were through the roof. She'd lie awake at night, heart racing, mind spinning. She tried meditation, therapy, medication. Nothing seemed to help. Then she learned about the breath. She started with 2 minutes of box breathing every morning. Just 2 minutes. Within a week, she noticed a difference. She was calmer in meetings, less reactive with her team, sleeping better. Then came the real test. A major deal fell apart at the last minute. Her boss was furious. Her team was panicking. Old Jennifer would have spiraled into anxiety and self-blame. New Jennifer felt the surge. Her heart started racing. Her breath quickened. And then she remembered. She excused herself, went to the bathroom, and did 2 minutes of extended exhale breathing. 4 in, 8 out. 4 in, 8 out. When she returned to the meeting, she was calm. Not numb. Not detached. Calm. She could think. She could lead. She could respond instead of react. The breath didn't save the deal. It saved her. And because she was calm, she helped her team navigate the crisis instead of adding to the chaos. Jennifer discovered what you're discovering now. The breath is not just air. It's medicine. It's power. It's freedom. Your action protocol for this chapter. Step 1. Pick one technique. Don't try to master all 3 at once. Pick one that resonates. Box breathing. Extended exhale. Physiological sigh. Just one. Practice it for 2 minutes, twice a day, for 1 week. Morning and evening. That's it. Step 2. Create triggers. Link your breathing practice to existing habits. Do it after you brush your teeth. Do it before you check your phone. Do it while your coffee brews. Anchor the new habit to something you already do. Step 3. Use micro-moments. Throughout the day, use small opportunities to practice. At a red light, take 3 conscious breaths. Waiting for a meeting to start? Do a physiological sigh. Feeling a minor frustration? Pause and do 1 round of box breathing. These micro moments build the muscle. Step 4. Remember in the storm. When you feel the hijack starting, the heat, the racing heart, the urge to react, pause. Remember you have a tool. Take one conscious breath. Just one. Then decide whether you need more. One breath can be enough to create the space you need. When in doubt, breathe. Your nervous system is listening. Say it again. When in doubt, breathe. Your nervous system is listening. Your breath is always with you. It never leaves. It never runs out. It's the one tool you can use anywhere, anytime, without anyone knowing. In a meeting, in an argument, in traffic, in line, alone in your car, surrounded by people. The breath is your secret weapon. Your emergency brake. Your path back to calm. You are the master of your own nervous system. Not by force, by breath. One inhale, one exhale, one choice at a time. Now, with the breath as your anchor, we must go deeper. Because sometimes the storm isn't just in your body. It's in your mind. The stories you tell yourself about what's happening. The narratives that keep the emotion alive long after the chemical surge has passed. We need to examine the stories. Moving to Chapter 6. The stories we tell ourselves, cognitive reframing. And if you're ready to make your breath the most powerful tool in your emotional toolkit, hit subscribe. Every week, more techniques, more science, more practices for the person who's done being a slave to their nervous system. You're not just learning about breath. You're building a practice. One inhale, one exhale, one subscription. Start now. Chapter 6 is about the stories we tell ourselves, cognitive reframing. Let me tell you about the most convincing liar you'll ever meet. It's not your ex-partner. It's not your boss. It's not the media. It's not the internet. It's the voice inside your own head. The one that tells you stories about what everything means. The one that narrates your life with such confidence that you forget it's just a narrator. Here's the truth that will set you free. It's not the event that triggers you. It's the story you tell yourself about the event. Someone cuts you off in traffic. The event, a car moved into your lane. The story, what a jerk. He did that on purpose. People are so selfish. Your anger comes from the story, not the event. Your boss sends a one-word email. Thanks. The event, a three-letter message. The story, she's angry at me. I'm in trouble. My job is at risk. Your anxiety comes from the story, not the email. Your friend doesn't text back for a day. The event, a delayed response. The story, she's ignoring me. She doesn't care. I did something wrong. Your hurt comes from the story, not the silence. These stories are not facts. They are interpretations. And most of the time, they're wrong. Don't believe everything you think. Your thoughts are not facts. Say that again. Don't believe everything you think. Your thoughts are not facts. Your brain is a meaning-making machine. It hates uncertainty. It will fill any gap in information with a story, whether that story is true or not. This kept your ancestors alive on the savannah. If they heard a rustle in the grass, they didn't wait to gather more data. They told a story, lion, and ran. The ones who were wrong lived. The ones who waited for proof got eaten. That same wiring operates today. But now the stakes are different. The rustle in the grass is an unanswered text. The lion is a terse email. And the story your brain tells, they hate me, I'm in trouble, I'm not good enough, creates suffering that has nothing to do with reality. You have a choice. Stay a slave to your automatic stories, or learn to question them. That's the key. This is called cognitive reframing. It's the practice of catching the automatic story, examining it, and choosing a more helpful, more accurate interpretation. It's not about toxic positivity. It's not about pretending everything is fine. It's about seeing clearly so you can respond wisely. Let me give you the framework. Step 1. Catch the story. When you feel a strong emotional reaction, pause. Ask yourself, what story am I telling myself right now? Get it out of your head and onto paper or into words. He didn't text back because he's angry at me. She gave that feedback because she thinks I'm incompetent. This always happens to me. Just name the story. Don't judge it. Don't fight it. Just see it. Step 2. Separate facts from interpretation. Now ask, what are the actual facts and what is my interpretation? Facts are objective, observable, undeniable. He didn't respond to my text within 24 hours. That's a fact. He's angry at me is an interpretation. The meeting was rescheduled. That's a fact. I'm being sidelined is an interpretation. Draw a line. Put facts on one side, interpretations on the other. See how much of your suffering comes from the interpretations, not the facts. Step 3. Generate alternative stories. Your brain grabbed the first story that made sense, usually the worst-case scenario. Now, consciously generate other possibilities. Ask, what's another way to see this? He didn't text back because he's overwhelmed with work. He didn't text back because his phone died. He didn't text back because he read it and forgot, like I do sometimes. He didn't text back because he's not a great texter, and it has nothing to do with me. These are not necessarily true either, but they're possible, and their existence proves that your automatic story is just one of many interpretations. You don't know which one is true, so why choose the one that makes you miserable? Step 4. Ask the friend test. Here's a powerful question. What would I tell a friend who came to me with this same situation? If your friend said, "My boss sent a one-word email and I think I'm getting fired," what would you say? You'd offer perspective. You'd list other possibilities. You'd remind them of their value. You'd be kind. Now offer that same kindness to yourself. You are strong. You are intelligent. You deserve the same compassion you give others. Step 5. Choose a more helpful story. You don't have to know the truth. You just have to choose a story that serves you. A story that leaves you calm instead of panicked. Open instead of defensive. Curious instead of certain. I don't know why he didn't text back. I'll wait and see. That's a story. It's also peace. The feedback might be useful. I'll listen and learn. That's a story. It's also growth. This is uncomfortable, but I can handle it. That's a story. It's also strength. You are the author of your own interpretations. Write stories that serve you. The power of curiosity over certainty. When you're certain, your mind is closed. There's nothing to learn, nothing to question, nothing to explore. You're right, they're wrong, and that's the end of it. Certainty feels good in the moment. It's also the fastest path to suffering. When you're curious, your mind is open. You don't know the full story, and that's okay. You're willing to explore, to learn, to consider other possibilities. Curiosity is the antidote to reactivity. You can't be reactive and curious at the same time. Try it. Try being furious at someone while genuinely curious about their perspective. It's impossible. Curiosity opens the mind. Certainty slams it shut. Don't believe everything you think. Your thoughts are not facts. Say it again. Don't believe everything you think. Your thoughts are not facts. This single sentence can save you years of unnecessary suffering. When the anxious thought arises, you can say, "There's a thought, not a fact." When the angry story appears, you can say, "There's an interpretation, not reality." When the self-critical voice chimes in, you can say, "There's a narrative, not the truth." Let me give you a real-world example. David was a manager who struggled with feedback. Every time his boss gave him constructive criticism, he'd spiral. "She thinks I'm terrible at my job. I'm going to get fired. I'll never succeed here." He'd spend days anxious, defensive, and distracted. He learned cognitive reframing. The next time his boss gave feedback, he felt the familiar spiral starting. But this time he paused. He caught the story. "She thinks I'm terrible at my job." He separated facts from interpretation. The fact: she gave him 3 specific suggestions for improvement. The interpretation: everything else. He asked the friend test. If my best friend came to me with this, what would I say? He'd say, "She's trying to help you grow." That's what good bosses do. It doesn't mean she thinks you're terrible. He chose a different story. This feedback is an opportunity to get better. She's investing in my development. The anxiety didn't disappear completely, but it lost its grip. He could listen. He could learn. He could respond instead of spiral. David didn't change his boss. He changed his story. And that changed everything. Your action protocol for this chapter. Step 1. Keep a story log. For 1 week, when you have a strong emotional reaction, write down the automatic story. Just capture it. "I felt angry when my partner left dishes out, and the story was they don't respect me." This builds awareness. Step 2. Practice the fact/interpretation split. For each story, draw the line. What are the actual, objective facts? What is your interpretation? See the gap. See how much of your suffering lives in the interpretation. Step 3. Generate 3 alternatives. For each automatic story, consciously generate 3 other possible interpretations. They don't have to be true. They just have to be possible. This breaks the grip of certainty. Step 4. Apply the friend test. When you're caught in a painful story, ask, What would I tell a friend in this situation? Then tell yourself that. You deserve your own compassion. Step 5. Practice curiosity. When you notice certainty arising, I know exactly what this means. Pause. Get curious. Do I really know? What else could be true? What am I missing? Curiosity is the door to freedom. Don't believe everything you think. Your thoughts are not facts. This is the practice, not perfection. Some days you'll catch the story immediately. Some days you'll spiral for hours before you notice. Both are okay. The practice is the point. You are the author of your own interpretations. You can choose stories that serve you. You can question the narratives that harm you. You can live with curiosity instead of certainty. And that is freedom. Now, with the power to question your stories, we need to understand how to stay balanced in the midst of it all. Not avoiding emotion, not suppressing feeling, but riding the waves with skill. We need to explore emotional balance. Moving to Chapter 7, Emotional Balance, the Middle Path. And if you're ready to stop believing every thought and start questioning every story, hit subscribe. Every week, more tools for the meaning-making machine in your head. More practices for the person who's done being triggered by their own interpretations. You're not just learning to reframe. You're learning to see clearly. Subscribe now. The truth is waiting. Next chapter is Chapter 7, Emotional Balance, the Middle Path. Let me clear up a massive misunderstanding. Emotional balance is not the absence of emotion. It's not becoming a robot. It's not never feeling angry, sad, or scared. That's not balance. That's numbness. That's disconnection. That's a different kind of suffering. Emotional balance is the ability to feel fully without being overwhelmed. It's riding the wave instead of being crushed by it. It's experiencing anger without becoming destructive, sadness without becoming hopeless, fear without becoming paralyzed, joy without becoming manic. The wave comes. You feel it. You move with it. It passes. You're still here. Still standing. Still you. This is the middle path. Between suppression on one side and explosion on the other. Between being a robot and being a volcano. Between feeling nothing and being destroyed by everything. You have a choice. Live at the extremes and suffer. Or find the middle path and be free. That's the key. Let me introduce you to the concept of the emotional thermostat. Some people run too hot. They're explosive, intense, reactive. Everything is a crisis. Every emotion is 10 out of 10. They burn hot and they burn out. Relationships suffer. Careers suffer. Health suffers. They're exhausted by their own intensity. Some people run too cold. They're numb, detached, disconnected. They've learned to shut down their feelings because feelings hurt. They don't feel anger, but they also don't feel joy. They don't feel fear, but they also don't feel love. They're safe from the storm, but they're also dead inside. The goal is neither. The goal is a thermostat that works, that can turn up when appropriate, when joy calls for celebration, when anger calls for boundary setting, when grief calls for mourning, and turn down when appropriate, when the situation doesn't require a 10 out of 10 response. Balance is the ability to access the right emotion at the right intensity for the right situation. Let me give you an example. Someone cuts you off in traffic. A hot reactor screams, honks, chases, ruins their own morning over a 10-second event. A cold reactor feels nothing, ignores it, but also ignores the fact that their body is still tense, still stressed, still carrying the weight. The balanced person feels the anger arise. They notice it. They might even say, wow, that was dangerous. They let the energy move through. They take a breath. They let it go. They're not suppressing. They're not exploding. They're riding the wave. That's the middle path. Feel it. Name it. Release it. This is the practice. 3 simple steps that contain the wisdom of every emotional regulation technique ever developed. Step 1. Feel it. When an emotion arises, don't run from it. Don't suppress it. Don't judge it. Feel it. Where is it in your body? What are the sensations? Heat in your chest? Tension in your shoulders? A knot in your stomach? Just feel. Give the emotion permission to be there. This is counterintuitive. Everything in you wants to push it away, but pushing makes it stronger. Feeling allows it to pass. Step 2. Name it. Once you've felt it, name it. Anger, fear, sadness, frustration, disappointment. Just a simple label. This activates your prefrontal cortex, the thinking brain. It creates distance between you and the emotion. You're no longer the emotion. You're the observer of the emotion. Naming is powerful. It turns I am angry into there is anger. That tiny shift changes everything. Step 3. Release it. Now let it go. Not by force, by allowing, by breathing, by choosing. You felt it. You've named it. Its purpose is served. Now you can release it back to the universe. This might happen in a moment. It might take longer. Some emotions need more time. That's okay. The practice is the same. Feel, name, release. Over and over until the wave passes. Feel it. Name it. Release it. Say it again. Feel it. Name it. Release it. This is not about getting rid of emotions. It's about processing them skillfully. It's about letting them move through you instead of getting stuck in you. Let me give you a real-world example. Marcus was a classic hot reactor. When something went wrong, he'd explode. Yelling, blaming, throwing things. He'd feel terrible afterward, ashamed of his behavior. But in the moment, he couldn't stop himself. His emotions ran him. He started practicing the middle path. The next time his computer crashed right before a deadline, he felt the familiar surge, the heat, the urge to scream. But this time he paused. He felt it. He noticed the tension in his chest, the heat in his face, the clenching of his jaw. He named it. Anger. Frustration. Just silently to himself. Then he released it. He took a breath. He said, "Okay, this happened. I can handle this." He didn't suppress the anger. He let it move through. 30 seconds later, the intensity had passed. He could think. He could problem solve. He could respond instead of explode. Marcus didn't become emotionless. He became balanced. He still felt anger. But now anger didn't own him. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can learn to ride the waves. Now, let's address the validation piece. This is critical. When you're in the middle of a strong emotion, the worst thing you can do is judge yourself for it. I shouldn't feel this way. I'm so weak. What's wrong with me? This is like adding fuel to a fire. It makes everything worse. Instead, validate the emotion. Say to yourself, "It makes sense that I feel this way." Someone criticized your work? It makes sense you feel defensive. Your boundaries were violated? It makes sense you feel angry. You lost something important? It makes sense you feel sad. Validation doesn't mean the emotion is justified in its intensity. It doesn't mean you have to act on it. It just means you acknowledge that given the circumstances, this feeling is understandable. You're not broken for having it. Validation calms the nervous system. It tells your brain, "We're safe. We can process this." It opens the door to release. So the full practice becomes, feel it. Notice the sensations in your body. Name it. Give it a simple label. Validate it. It makes sense I feel this way. Release it. Let it move through. Breathe. Choose your response. This is the middle path. This is emotional balance. Let me give you another example. Sarah's teenager spoke to her with disrespect. Old Sarah would have exploded, yelling, punishing, escalating. Or she would have shut down, ignoring, withdrawing, numbing with wine. New Sarah felt the anger rise. She felt it, the heat, the tension. She named it anger. She validated it. It makes sense I feel angry. I deserve respect in my own home. Then she released it. She took a breath and chose her response. She said calmly, "I hear that you're frustrated. We can talk about that. But the way you spoke to me is not okay. Let's take a break and come back to this in 10 minutes. She didn't suppress. She didn't explode. She rode the wave. And she modeled emotional intelligence for her child. That's the middle path. Your action protocol for this chapter. Step 1. Identify your default setting. Are you typically too hot or too cold? Do you explode or shut down? Do you feel everything too intensely or do you numb out? Just notice. No judgment. Just data. Step 2. Practice the wave. The next time a strong emotion arises, don't try to change it. Just ride it. Feel it fully for 90 seconds. Notice how it rises, peaks, and falls. You're not trying to make it go away. You're learning to be with it. Step 3. Use the full protocol. When triggered, run the sequence. Feel, where is this in my body? Name, what is this emotion? Validate, it makes sense I feel this way. Release, breathe. Let it move. Choose. Step 4. Create a validation phrase. Come up with a phrase that works for you. It's okay to feel this. This is human. Anyone would feel this way. Keep it handy for when the waves get big. Step 5. Celebrate the small wins. When you ride a wave instead of being crushed by it, even a small one, acknowledge it. I just handled that better than I would have last month. This positive reinforcement builds the neural pathway. You're training your brain for balance. Feel it. Name it. Release it. This is the practice, not perfection. Some days you'll ride the wave beautifully. Some days you'll wipe out. Both are part of the journey. The goal is not to never fall. The goal is to get back up, learn, and keep practicing. You are the master of your own emotional world. Not by controlling your feelings, by learning to be with them skillfully, by finding the middle path between suppression and explosion, by riding the waves instead of being crushed by them. This is emotional balance. This is freedom. Now, with the middle path as your guide, we must address something deeper, something that makes all of this possible, something most people skip because it feels uncomfortable. We must talk about self-compassion. Moving to Chapter 8, Self-Compassion, the foundation of emotional resilience. And if you're ready to stop being crushed by your emotions and start riding the waves, hit subscribe. Every week, more practices for the middle path. More tools for the person who's done with extremes. You're not just learning about emotional balance. You're building it, one wave at a time. Subscribe now. The middle path is waiting. Chapter 8 tells the reality of self-compassion, the foundation of emotional resilience. Let me tell you about the war you didn't know you were fighting. It's not with your boss. It's not with your partner. It's not with the world. It's with yourself. Every time you feel an emotion you don't like, you judge it. I shouldn't feel angry. I'm so weak for being sad. What's wrong with me for feeling anxious? This judgment creates a second layer of suffering, shame, guilt, self-criticism, on top of the original emotion. Now you're not just angry. You're angry at yourself for being angry. Now you're not just sad. You're ashamed of being sad. You've doubled your pain. And that second layer, the self-judgment, is what keeps you trapped in reactivity. Most people react because they're at war with themselves. They're fighting their own emotions, and they're losing. The war never ends because the enemy is inside the walls. Every feeling becomes a battle. Every reaction becomes proof of failure. The cycle repeats endlessly. There is only one way out. Self-compassion. Self-compassion is not self-indulgence. It's not letting yourself off the hook. It's not weakness. It's the foundation of emotional resilience. It's the only way to stop fighting yourself so you can actually grow. Be the friend to yourself that you've always needed. Say that again. Be the friend to yourself that you've always needed. Think about how you treat a friend who's struggling. They come to you upset. Do you say, "You're so weak. What's wrong with you? Get it together"? No. You're kind. You listen. You say, "That sounds really hard. I'm here for you. You'll get through this." You offer compassion. You offer support. You offer understanding. Now think about how you treat yourself when you're struggling. The inner voice is often cruel, harsh, unforgiving. You idiot. Why did you do that? You always mess up. You're never going to change. Would you ever speak to a friend that way? Of course not. So why do you speak to yourself that way? You have a choice. Stay at war with yourself and stay trapped. Or make peace with yourself and become free. That's the key. Let me introduce you to the work of Dr. Kristen Neff, the world's leading researcher on self-compassion. She's identified 3 core components. Learn them. Practice them. Live them. Component 1, mindfulness. Mindfulness is awareness. It's noticing your thoughts and feelings without judgment. Instead of saying, "I'm so angry," and spiraling, you say there is anger. Instead of, "I'm such a failure," you say there is a feeling of failure. Mindfulness creates space. It allows you to see your experience clearly without being consumed by it. You can't be compassionate towards something you're not aware of. Awareness comes first. Component 2, common humanity. Common humanity is the recognition that suffering is part of being human. You are not alone in your struggles. Everyone feels anger. Everyone feels fear. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone falls short. When you're in pain, it's easy to feel isolated, like you're the only one who's ever felt this way. Common humanity reminds you, this is part of the human experience. You're not broken. You're not defective. You're human. Component 3, kindness. Kindness is the active practice of treating yourself with warmth and care. It's the gentle inner voice, the supportive inner presence, the hand on your own heart. Instead of self-criticism, you offer self-encouragement. This is hard, and you're doing your best. Instead of judgment, you offer understanding. It makes sense you feel this way. Instead of punishment, you offer support. What do you need right now? These 3 components work together. Mindfulness brings awareness. Common humanity connects you to others. Kindness offers care. Together, they create the foundation of emotional resilience. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can learn to be kind to yourself. Let me give you a real-world example. Rachel was a perfectionist and a harsh self-critic. When she made a mistake at work, she'd spiral. I'm so stupid. I can't believe I did that. Everyone thinks I'm incompetent. The original mistake was small. The self-flagellation was enormous. She'd spend hours, sometimes days, beating herself up. She learned about self-compassion. The next time she made a mistake, she tried something different. First, mindfulness. She noticed the self-critical thoughts. There's the inner critic. There's the shame. She didn't believe them. She just noticed them. Second, common humanity. She reminded herself, everyone makes mistakes. I'm not alone in this. This is part of being human. Third, kindness. She placed a hand on her heart and said, it's okay. You're human. You'll learn from this and do better next time. The shame didn't disappear instantly, but it lost its grip. Within minutes, she was able to think clearly, address the mistake, and move on. The war within herself had ended. Rachel didn't become perfect. She became free. Free from the second layer of suffering. Free from the endless self-criticism. Free to learn and grow instead of spiraling and shrinking. You can have that freedom too. It's not about never failing. It's about how you treat yourself when you do. Let's break this down into practice. Practice 1, the compassionate pause. When you notice you're in pain, angry, sad, anxious, ashamed, pause. Take a breath. Place a hand on your heart or another soothing spot. Feel the warmth of your own touch. This simple act activates the caregiving system in your brain. It's the physical foundation of self-compassion. Practice 2, the compassionate phrase. Develop a phrase you can say to yourself in difficult moments. Something simple and kind. This is hard, and I'm here for you. I'm doing the best I can. May I be kind to myself in this moment. This too shall pass. Find what works for you and use it. Practice 3, the friend letter. When you're struggling, write a letter to yourself as if you were writing to a dear friend going through the same thing. What would you say? What comfort would you offer? What wisdom would you share? Then read the letter and receive your own kindness. Practice 4, the inner voice upgrade. Pay attention to your inner voice. When you hear self-criticism, pause. Ask, would I speak to a friend this way? If not, rephrase. Turn, you're such an idiot, into you made a mistake. It happens. What can you learn? Turn, I can't believe you did that, into that was hard. You're human. Let's figure this out. Practice 5, the daily compassion check-in. Each evening, take 2 minutes to check in with yourself. How was your day? What was hard? What do you need? Offer yourself a moment of kindness before you sleep. This builds the habit over time. Be the friend to yourself that you've always needed. This is not selfish. It's essential. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot offer compassion to others if you have none for yourself. You cannot be patient with the world if you're constantly at war within. Self-compassion is not a luxury. It's the foundation. It's the ground beneath your feet. It's what makes all the other practices possible. Think about it. When you're kind to yourself, you're less reactive. Why? Because you're not already inflamed by self-criticism. The second layer of suffering is gone. You're just dealing with the original emotion, not the shame about having it. When you're kind to yourself, you recover faster. Why? Because you're not wasting energy on self-flagellation. You can learn from mistakes and move on instead of spiraling for days. When you're kind to yourself, you're more resilient. Why? Because you have an internal ally instead of an internal enemy. You face challenges with support instead of sabotage. Be the friend to yourself that you've always needed. This is the practice, not perfection. Some days you'll be kind. Some days you'll be harsh. Both are part of the journey. The goal is not to never judge yourself. The goal is to notice when you do and choose compassion instead. Let me give you one more example. Tom was a veteran who struggled with PTSD. His inner voice was brutal. You're broken. You're damaged. You should be over this by now. He'd been to therapy, tried medications, worked through his trauma, but the self-criticism remained. He learned about self-compassion. At first, it felt foreign, weak. He'd been taught to be tough, to push through, to never go easy on himself. But he tried it. When the critical voice arose, he'd pause. He'd place a hand on his heart. He'd say, this is hard. You've been through so much. It makes sense you feel this way. I'm here for you. It didn't erase his trauma. It didn't cure his PTSD, but it changed his relationship to himself. The war within began to quiet. He wasn't fighting himself anymore. He was on his own side. Tom discovered what you're discovering now. Self-compassion is not weakness. It's the deepest kind of strength. The strength to meet your own pain with kindness instead of more pain. The strength to be on your own side. Your action protocol for this chapter. Step 1. Notice the inner critic. For one day, just notice when the harsh inner voice speaks. Don't try to change it. Just notice. Ah, there's the critic. Awareness is the first step. Step 2. Practice the hand on heart. When you notice pain, any pain, pause and place a hand on your heart. Feel the warmth. Take a breath. This simple act is a gateway to compassion. Step 3. Choose a compassionate phrase. Pick one phrase that resonates. Write it down. Practice saying it to yourself, especially in hard moments. Let it become your inner ally. Step 4. Write the friend letter. This week, when you're struggling, take 5 minutes to write yourself a compassionate letter. Read it aloud. Receive your own kindness. Step 5. End each day with kindness. Before sleep, place a hand on your heart and say, "Today was hard in some ways, and I did my best. I am worthy of rest and peace." Let kindness be the last thing you feel. Be the friend to yourself that you've always needed. This is the foundation. This is where emotional resilience begins. Not with tougher armor, with a softer heart. Not with more self-discipline, with more self-kindness. Not with fighting yourself, with befriending yourself. You are strong. You are intelligent. You are worthy of your own compassion. Now, with self-compassion as your foundation, we need to look outward. Because emotions don't exist in a vacuum. They're shaped by what we focus on. And most of us are focused on the wrong things. We need to rewire the brain through gratitude. Moving to Chapter 9, Gratitude, Rewiring the Brain for Positivity. And if you're ready to end the war with yourself and become your own best friend, hit subscribe. Every week, more practices for the person who's done fighting themselves. More tools for building the foundation of emotional resilience. You're not just learning about self-compassion. You're building it. One kind moment at a time. Subscribe now. Be the friend you've always needed. Chapter 9 is Gratitude, Rewiring the Brain for Positivity. Let me tell you about the factory settings of your brain. They're not good. Not for happiness, anyway. Your brain has a negativity bias. It's wired to notice threats, not blessings. To remember criticisms, not compliments. To anticipate disaster, not delight. This kept your ancestors alive on the savannah. The ones who noticed the saber-toothed tiger survived. The ones who stopped to appreciate the sunset got eaten. You inherited that wiring. It's still there. And in the modern world, it's a liability. The negativity bias is why one rude comment can ruin your whole day, even after 20 kind ones. It's why you lie awake at night replaying an embarrassing moment from 5 years ago. It's why the news is full of disasters and tragedies, because that's what your brain is designed to pay attention to. You are not broken. You are human, but you can change. Gratitude is the intentional practice of counteracting your brain's negativity bias. It's not toxic positivity. It's not pretending everything is perfect when it's not. It's not ignoring real problems or genuine pain. It's neural training. It's deliberately shifting your attention to what's good, what's working, what's present, so that over time, your brain becomes wired to notice those things automatically. Gratitude is not about what you have. It's about what you notice. Say that again. Gratitude is not about what you have. It's about what you notice. Two people can have the exact same life circumstances. One is miserable, focused on every flaw and lack. The other is content, noticing the small gifts and ordinary blessings. The difference isn't what they have. It's what they pay attention to. You have a choice. Let your brain's factory settings run your emotional life. Or train your brain to see what's good. That's the key. Let's look at the science. When you practice gratitude, multiple things happen in your brain and body. First, gratitude activates the prefrontal cortex. This is the thinking, choosing, regulating part of your brain. The same part that goes offline during amygdala hijack. Gratitude literally strengthens the neural pathways that help you stay calm and choose wisely. Second, gratitude reduces stress hormones. Studies show that regular gratitude practice lowers cortisol by as much as 23%. Less cortisol means less anxiety, less inflammation, better sleep, stronger immune function. Third, Gratitude releases dopamine and serotonin. These are the feel-good neurotransmitters. They create feelings of pleasure and well-being. And here's the key. When you practice gratitude regularly, your brain becomes more sensitive to these rewards. You literally become easier to please, more easily content. Fourth, gratitude builds emotional resilience over time. People who practice gratitude recover faster from trauma, cope better with stress, and report higher levels of life satisfaction. They're not immune to suffering. They just bounce back faster. This is not wishful thinking. It's neuroscience. Regular gratitude practice literally changes your brain. It rewires the neural pathways. It shifts the default setting from threat detection to blessing noticing. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can rewire your own brain. Let me give you a real-world example. James was a chronic complainer. Not a bad person, just wired that way. He'd notice everything wrong. The traffic, the weather, his coworkers, his wife's minor habits. He'd come home each evening with a mental list of grievances. He was miserable, and so was everyone around him. His therapist suggested gratitude. James rolled his eyes. That's so cheesy. I'm not writing in a journal about sunsets. But he was desperate enough to try. He started small. Every morning, while his coffee brewed, he'd think of one thing he was grateful for. Just one. His health, his job, his kids, the fact that it wasn't raining. It felt forced at first, artificial, but he kept at it. After a few weeks, something shifted. He started noticing good things during the day, not just in the morning. The barista's smile, his son's laugh, the way the light hit the trees on his drive home. He wasn't trying to notice. It just started happening. His wife noticed. You seem different, she said. Happier. James realized he was. Nothing in his life had changed except what he paid attention to. James discovered what you're discovering now. Gratitude is not about your circumstances. It's about your attention. Gratitude is not about what you have. It's about what you notice. Now, let's get practical. How do you actually practice gratitude? Not as a concept, as a daily discipline. Practice 1, the daily gratitude list. This is the classic for a reason. Each day, write down 3 things you're grateful for. That's it. 3 things. They don't have to be profound. A good cup of coffee, a text from a friend, the fact that your car started. Specificity matters. I'm grateful for my friend Sarah checking in on me today is more powerful than I'm grateful for my friends. Do this at the same time each day, morning or evening, whichever works. Make it a habit. 3 things. Every day. Practice 2, the gratitude journal. If you want to go deeper, keep a dedicated journal. Not just lists, but reflections. Write about a person who made a difference in your life. Describe a moment of beauty you witnessed. Explore why you're grateful for something, not just what. The act of writing engages your brain differently than just thinking. It deepens the neural training. Practice 3, gratitude letters. Once a month, write a letter to someone who has made a positive impact on your life. Tell them specifically what they did and how it affected you. You don't even have to send it, though sending it is powerful. The act of writing the letter shifts your focus to gratitude and strengthens your relationships. Practice 4, mental notes throughout the day. You don't need a journal to practice gratitude. Throughout the day, make mental notes. When you notice something good, pause for 3 seconds and say to yourself, I'm grateful for that. The hot shower, the green light, the laugh with a coworker. These micro moments add up. Practice 5, gratitude before meals. Before you eat, take 1 breath and silently acknowledge the food, where it came from, the hands that grew it, transported it, prepared it. This ancient practice shifts your relationship to consumption and cultivates appreciation. Practice 6, gratitude before sleep. As you lie in bed, before sleep, think of 3 good moments from the day. They don't have to be big, just 3 things that went well. This trains your brain to scan for positivity as you drift off, improving sleep quality and emotional tone. Gratitude is not about what you have. It's about what you notice. This is the key insight. 2 people can have identical lives. One is miserable, focused on every lack and flaw. The other is content, noticing the ordinary gifts that are everywhere. The difference is attention, and attention is trainable. Let me give you another example. Maria was going through a difficult divorce. Her life felt like it was falling apart. Finances, housing, parenting, all up in the air. A friend suggested gratitude. Maria wanted to punch her friend. Gratitude? My life is a disaster. What do I have to be grateful for? But she tried it. Not because she felt grateful, because she was desperate. She started with tiny things. A warm bed, a kind text from her sister, the fact that her car had gas. She wrote them down, even when it felt ridiculous. Over time, something shifted. Not her circumstances, those were still hard, but her relationship to them. She still felt pain, but she also felt moments of warmth. The gratitude practice didn't erase her suffering. It made the suffering bearable. It gave her moments of light in the darkness. Maria discovered that gratitude is not about pretending everything is fine. It's about noticing that some things are, even when everything isn't. Gratitude is not about what you have. It's about what you notice. Your action protocol for this chapter. Step 1. Start small. Don't try to be grateful for everything. Start with one thing per day, one thing you noticed and appreciated. Do this for 1 week. Build the habit before you build the volume. Step 2. Be specific. Avoid vague gratitudes. I'm grateful for my family becomes, I'm grateful for the way my daughter laughed at dinner. Specificity engages the brain more deeply. It makes the gratitude real. Step 3. Use anchors. Link your gratitude practice to existing habits. Morning coffee, lunch break, toothbrushing, bedtime. Anchor the new habit to something you already do. This makes it stick. Step 4. Feel it. When you name something you're grateful for, don't just think it. Feel it. Pause for 3 seconds and let the feeling of gratitude wash through you. This deepens the neural training. It's the difference between listing and experiencing. Step 5. Return when you forget. You will forget. You will have days when gratitude feels impossible. That's okay. Just return. One grateful thought is all it takes to restart the practice. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to keep coming back. Gratitude is not about what you have. It's about what you notice. This is the practice. Not toxic positivity. Not ignoring pain. Not pretending everything is perfect. Just training your attention to include the good alongside the hard. Your brain will always notice threats. That's its job. But you can train it to also notice blessings. You can expand what you see. You can become someone who doesn't just survive, but who notices, appreciates, and lives fully. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can rewire your own brain, one grateful thought at a time. Now, with gratitude as your daily practice, we need to build on this foundation. Because noticing the good is one thing. Bouncing back from the hard is another. We need to develop emotional resilience. Moving to Chapter 10, Emotional Resilience, Bouncing Back from Life's Challenges. And if you're ready to rewire your brain for positivity and start noticing what's good, hit subscribe. Every week, more practices for the person who's done being run by their negativity bias. More tools for training your attention. You're not just learning about gratitude. You're building it. One noticed blessing at a time. Subscribe now. Start noticing. Chapter 10 unlocks emotional resilience. Bouncing back from life's challenges. Let me clear up a massive misunderstanding about resilience. Most people think resilience is about being tough, about never breaking, about armor so thick that nothing can hurt you. They imagine someone stoic, unfeeling, impenetrable. That's not resilience. That's armor. And armor has a problem. It keeps everything out, including the good stuff. Love, joy, connection, growth. The armored person doesn't feel pain, but they also don't feel much of anything. Resilience is not about never falling. It's about how quickly you get up. Resilience is not avoiding difficulty. That's impossible. Difficulty comes for everyone. Resilience is the ability to move through difficulty and return to baseline. It's emotional flexibility, not emotional armor. Think of a palm tree in a hurricane. The rigid oak snaps. The flexible palm bends, sways, moves with the wind, and when the storm passes, it returns to upright. That's resilience. You have a choice. Build armor and break when the storm is too strong. Or build flexibility and bend without breaking. That's the key. Let's break down the components of resilience. These are not traits you're born with. They're skills you can build. Component 1. Optimism. Not delusion. Not toxic positivity. Not pretending everything is fine when it's not. Real optimism is the belief that things can get better, that you have some agency, that this difficulty is not permanent. Optimism says, this is hard, and I will get through it. Not this isn't hard. Not it will be easy. Just I will get through it. Optimism is the fuel for resilience. Without it, you give up. With it, you keep going. Component 2, acceptance. This is the other side of the coin. Optimism is about the future. Acceptance is about the present. Accepting what you cannot change. Not liking it. Not wanting it. Not pretending it's okay. Just acknowledging reality. This happened. This is where I am. These are the facts. Acceptance is not weakness. It's the foundation of all effective action. You cannot solve a problem you refuse to acknowledge. You cannot move forward from a place you deny being. Component 3, problem solving. Once you've accepted reality, you focus on what you can control. You ask, what can I do? What's within my power? What's the next right step? Resilient people are practical. They don't waste energy on what they can't change. They invest it in what they can. Component 4, connection. Resilient people lean on others. Not because they're weak, because they're wise. They know that isolation magnifies suffering. They reach out. They ask for help. They let others in. Connection is not a sign of weakness. It's a source of strength. The lone wolf may be tough, but the pack survives. These 4 components work together. Optimism gives you hope. Acceptance grounds you in reality. Problem-solving gives you agency. Connection gives you support. Together, they form the foundation of resilience. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can build all of them. Now, here's the most important insight. You build resilience through small, daily challenges. You don't become resilient by surviving one massive crisis. You become resilient by handling hundreds of small frustrations, day after day, year after year. Each time you pause instead of reacting, you build the muscle. Each time you choose acceptance over denial, you strengthen the neural pathway. Each time you reach out instead of isolating, you deepen the connection. The small stuff is the training ground for the big stuff. Practice when the coffee is cold. Practice when the internet is slow. Practice when someone cuts you off in traffic. Practice when your plans change unexpectedly. These are not annoyances. They are repetitions. They are opportunities to build resilience. By the time the real crisis comes, the job loss, the health scare, the relationship rupture, you won't have to think about resilience. It will be automatic. You'll have built the muscle through thousands of small reps. Resilience is not about never falling. It's about how quickly you get up. Let me give you a real-world example. Elena was a single mother with a high-stress job and 2 young kids. Life was a constant series of small crises. A sick child, a missed deadline, a broken appliance, a difficult boss. She felt like she was always barely keeping her head above water. She learned about building resilience through small challenges. She started paying attention to her daily frustrations, not as problems to solve, but as training opportunities. When her toddler had a meltdown in the grocery store, she paused, breathed, accepted that this was happening, focused on what she could control, her own response, not her child's emotions. Reminded herself this phase would pass. When her boss sent a critical email, she paused, felt the sting, accepted that the feedback might have merit, focused on what she could learn, reached out to a trusted colleague for perspective. Small reps, every day, hundreds of them. A year later, Elena's father was diagnosed with cancer. A real crisis. The old Elena would have crumbled. The new Elena felt the pain, deeply, and then did what she'd trained to do. She accepted the reality. She focused on what she could control. She leaned on her support network. She kept going. Elena didn't avoid the pain. She moved through it. And she returned to baseline faster than she ever could have before. The small reps had built the muscle. The crisis came, and she was ready. You can build that same muscle. It's not about never struggling. It's about how you meet the struggle. Let's get practical. How do you build resilience starting today? Practice 1. Reframe frustrations as training. When a minor frustration arises, say to yourself, this is a resilience rep, the slow driver, the long line, the spilled coffee. See it not as an annoyance, but as an opportunity to practice. Each rep builds the muscle. Practice 2. Practice the 4 components daily. Each day, in small ways, practice optimism. End each day by naming one reason you're hopeful about tomorrow. Acceptance. When something doesn't go your way, say it is what it is and mean it. Problem solving. For one small problem each day, ask, what can I control here? And do that thing. Connection. Reach out to one person each day. A text, a call, a moment of genuine presence. Practice 3. Keep a resilience log. Each evening, write down one challenge you faced and how you handled it. Not to judge yourself, to notice your growth. Today was hard, and I kept going. I accepted something I couldn't change. I reached out when I needed help. This builds awareness and reinforces the behavior. Practice 4. Study resilient people. Think of someone you know who handles difficulty well. What do they do? How do they think? What can you learn from them? You don't have to reinvent resilience. You can learn from those who have it. Practice 5. Prepare for the big stuff. When you're calm, think about potential future challenges. Not to worry, to prepare. If X happened, what would I do? Who would I call? What resources would I need? This mental rehearsal builds confidence and reduces the shock when difficulty comes. Resilience is not about never falling. It's about how quickly you get up. This is the truth. You will fall. Everyone does. Life guarantees it. The question is not whether you'll face difficulty. The question is what you'll do when you do. Will you stay down, defeated by the weight of it? Or will you get up, dust yourself off, and keep moving? The answer depends on the muscle you've built, on the reps you've done, on the small choices you make every day. You are the master of your own resilience. Not because you're immune to pain, because you've trained yourself to move through it. Let me give you one more example. David was a firefighter. He'd seen things that would break most people. Fires, accidents, loss. People asked him how he coped. He said, training. We train for everything. Not because we know what will happen, because we know that when it does, we won't have to think. We'll just act. Emotional resilience is the same. You train on the small stuff so that when the big stuff comes, you don't have to think. You just act. You just get up. You just keep going. Your action protocol for this chapter. Step 1. Identify your training ground. What are the daily frustrations that could become resilience reps? Traffic? Waiting? Interruptions? Criticism? Make a list. These are your practice opportunities. Step 2. Commit to 1 rep per day. Each day, choose one frustration and handle it with intention. Pause. Accept. Focus on what you can control. Reach out if needed. That's 1 rep. That's all it takes. Step 3. Notice your recovery time. When something difficult happens, notice how long it takes you to return to baseline. Not to judge, just to observe. Over time, with practice, you'll notice that time's shrinking. That's progress. Step 4. Celebrate the small recoveries. When you handle something well, even something small, acknowledge it. I just got back up. I didn't stay down. This positive reinforcement builds the neural pathway. You're training your brain for resilience. Step 5. Keep going. Resilience is not a destination. It's a practice. You don't arrive. You just keep showing up, keep falling, keep getting up. That's the path. That's the practice. That's the life. Resilience is not about never falling. It's about how quickly you get up. This is the practice, not perfection. Some days you'll get up fast. Some days you'll stay down longer. Both are part of the journey. The goal is not to never struggle. The goal is to keep getting up over and over for your whole life. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can build this muscle. 1 rep at a time. 1 fall at a time. 1 rise at a time. Now, with resilience as your practice, we must look at one of the most powerful ways to release the emotional weight that keeps you down. The weight of past hurts. The weight of resentment. The weight of unforgiveness. We need to explore forgiveness. Moving to Chapter 11. Forgiveness, releasing the emotional debt. And if you're ready to build the resilience muscle and start getting up faster every time you fall, hit subscribe. Every week, more practices for the person who's done staying down. More tools for bouncing back. You're not just learning about resilience. You're building it. 1 rep at a time. Subscribe now. Keep getting up. Chapter 11 is next in line, which is forgiveness, releasing the emotional debt. Let me tell you about the heaviest burden you carry. It's not your responsibilities. It's not your work. It's not your worries about the future. It's the weight of the past, the grudges you hold, the resentments you nurse, the injuries you replay over and over, keeping them fresh and painful years after they happened. You carry this weight every day, and it's exhausting you. Here's the truth that can set you free. Forgiveness is not for the other person. It's for you. Holding on to anger and resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It doesn't hurt them. They've probably moved on. They might not even remember what they did. But you? You drink that poison every time you replay the injury. Every time you rehearse what you should have said. Every time you feel the old anger rise. You are the one suffering. You are the one trapped. You are the one whose peace is stolen over and over by a past that cannot be changed. Forgiveness is giving up the hope that the past could be any different. Say that again. Forgiveness is giving up the hope that the past could be any different. It's not saying what happened was okay. It's not saying the person who hurt you was right. It's not saying you deserved it. It's simply acknowledging that the past is fixed. It cannot be changed. No amount of anger, no amount of replaying, no amount of wishing will alter what happened. The only thing you can change is your relationship to it. You can stop carrying it. You can put it down. You have a choice. Keep drinking the poison and hope the other person feels it. Or put down the glass and be free. That's the key. Let me be clear about what forgiveness is not. Forgiveness is not condoning. It's not saying what happened was acceptable. Some things are not acceptable. Some injuries are profound. Forgiveness doesn't require you to pretend otherwise. Forgiveness is not forgetting. You may never forget. The memory may always be there. Forgiveness is about releasing the emotional charge attached to the memory, not erasing the memory itself. Forgiveness is not reconciling. You don't have to let the person back into your life. You don't have to trust them again. You can forgive someone and still maintain boundaries. You can forgive someone and never speak to them again. Forgiveness is about your inner state, not your outer relationship. Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. It's releasing the emotional debt you've been carrying. It's deciding that you will no longer be a prisoner of the past. It's choosing peace over being right. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can do this. Let me give you the process. Forgiveness is not a one-time event. It's a practice. You may have to do it many times for the same injury. That's okay. Each time, you're releasing a little more weight. Step 1. Acknowledge the hurt. You can't forgive what you won't acknowledge. Start by naming what happened. Be honest about the injury. They betrayed my trust. They said something cruel. They weren't there when I needed them. Don't minimize it. Don't explain it away. Just acknowledge it. Feel the feelings that come with it. The anger, the sadness, the disappointment. Let them be there. This is not about bypassing pain. It's about moving through it. Step 2. Feel the feelings. Give yourself permission to feel whatever is there. Not forever. Just for now. Cry if you need to. Scream into a pillow. Write an angry letter you'll never send. Let the emotion move through you. Suppressed feelings don't disappear. They fester. Let them out. Step 3. Decide to release. This is the conscious choice. You decide that you will no longer carry this weight. You decide that your peace is more important than your rightness. You decide to forgive, not for them, but for you. This decision may not feel like anything at first. It's not a feeling. It's a choice. You choose to release, even if you don't feel like it. Step 4. Practice letting go. When the old anger arises, and it will, remind yourself of your choice. I've already forgiven this. I'm not carrying it anymore. Breathe. Let the feeling pass. You may have to do this dozens, hundreds of times. Each time, you're strengthening the neural pathway of release. Step 5. Repeat as needed. Forgiveness is not linear. You'll think you're done, and then something will trigger the old wound. That's okay. It doesn't mean you failed. It means you're human. Just go through the process again. Acknowledge. Feel. Choose. Release. Over and over until the charge is gone. Forgiveness is giving up the hope that the past could be any different. This is the mantra. When you find yourself wishing things had been different, replaying the injury, feeling the old anger rise, say it to yourself. I am giving up the hope that the past could be any different. Let it remind you that the only thing you can change is your relationship to what happened. Let me give you a real-world example. Marcus was betrayed by his business partner. They'd built a company together for a decade, and then his partner embezzled money and left Marcus with the debt and the legal mess. It was devastating. Financially, emotionally, professionally. Marcus held on to his anger for years. He'd replay the betrayal. He'd imagine confrontations. He'd tell anyone who would listen about what his partner did. The anger was a constant companion. It was also exhausting him. A friend said to him, "This anger isn't hurting him. He doesn't even know you're angry. It's hurting you." Marcus started the forgiveness process. Not for his partner. For himself. He acknowledged the hurt. He felt the rage, the grief, the sense of injustice. He wrote pages and pages of angry letters he never sent. Then, one day, he made the choice. He decided to release. He said out loud, "I forgive him, not because he deserves it, because I deserve peace." The anger didn't disappear overnight. It kept coming back. But each time, Marcus practiced. He'd feel the old surge, Then remind himself, I've already forgiven this. I'm not carrying it anymore. He'd breathe. He'd let it pass. Over months, the charge diminished. The memories were still there, but they no longer had power over him. He could think about that period without spiraling. He was free. Marcus discovered what you're discovering now. Forgiveness is not about the other person. It's about you. It's about taking your power back from the past. It's not about what they did. It's about your freedom. Let's get practical. How do you practice forgiveness, starting today? Practice 1. The forgiveness list. Make a list of everyone you're holding resentment toward. Include yourself. Yes, self-forgiveness is part of this too. Write down the injury next to each name. Just acknowledge what's there. Practice 2. The unsent letter. For one person on your list, write a letter expressing everything you feel. Don't hold back. Don't censor. Get it all out. Then read it aloud. Feel the feelings. Then destroy the letter. Burn it, shred it, tear it up. The act of destruction symbolizes release. Practice 3. The forgiveness meditation. Sit quietly. Bring to mind someone you want to forgive. Say to yourself, I forgive you. Not because what you did was okay, because I deserve peace. Repeat it several times. Notice what arises. Breathe through it. This is a practice, not a one-time fix. Practice 4. The self-forgiveness practice. Most of us are hardest on ourselves. Bring to mind something you regret, something you're ashamed of. Place a hand on your heart. Say, I forgive myself. I did the best I could with what I knew at the time. I am learning and growing. Let yourself receive your own forgiveness. Practice 5. The daily release. At the end of each day, take a moment to release any resentments that accumulated. Ask yourself, is there anyone I need to forgive today, even for something small? Then do it silently. This keeps resentment from building up over time. Forgiveness is giving up the hope that the past could be any different. This is the practice, not a one-time event, a daily choice, a continuous release, a commitment to your own freedom. Think about what you're carrying. The old hurts, the old angers, the old resentments. They weigh you down. They color your present. They keep you reactive because any trigger can reopen the old wound. What would it feel like to put that weight down? To walk through life unburdened by the past? To have all that energy available for your present, your future, your growth? That's what forgiveness offers. Not forgetfulness. Freedom. You are the master of your own emotional world, not the prisoner of your past. You can choose to release what no longer serves you. You can choose to forgive, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. Let me give you one more example. Sophia's father abandoned the family when she was a child. She'd carried that wound for 40 years. It affected every relationship, every choice, every sense of self-worth. She tried therapy, support groups, every form of healing. But the wound remained. Then she learned about forgiveness as release. Not reconciling. Her father was long dead. Not condoning. What he did was unforgivable. But releasing herself from carrying it. She went through the process. Acknowledged the hurt. Felt the decades of grief and rage. Wrote letters she'd never sent. And finally, she made the choice. I forgive him. Not because he deserves it. Because I deserve to be free. The wound didn't disappear. But the weight lifted. She could remember her childhood without being consumed by it. She could talk about her father without the old bitterness rising. She was still hurt, but she was no longer defined by the hurt. Sophia discovered that forgiveness is not about the other person. It's about you. It's about taking your life back. Your action protocol for this chapter. Step 1. Identify one person to forgive. Start with one. Just one. It could be someone who hurt you deeply. It could be someone who annoyed you yesterday. Pick one and commit to the practice. Step 2. Acknowledge and feel. Take time to really acknowledge the hurt. Write it down. Feel the feelings. Don't rush this step. Let the emotion move through you. Step 3. Make the choice. Say it out loud. I forgive name. Not because what they did was okay. Because I deserve peace. Even if you don't feel it, say it. The choice precedes the feeling. Step 4. Practice release. When the old feelings arise, and they will, remind yourself of your choice. Breathe. Let it pass. This is the ongoing practice. Step 5. Celebrate your freedom. When you notice that an old trigger no longer has power over you, acknowledge it. I'm free of that. I released it. Celebrate your own growth. You did the work. You deserve the freedom. Forgiveness is giving up the hope that the past could be any different. This is the truth. The past is fixed. It cannot be changed. But your relationship to it can. You can stop carrying it. You can put it down. You can be free. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can forgive, not for them, but for you. And in that forgiveness, you will find a peace you've been seeking your whole life. Now, with the weight of the past released, we must look outward. Because emotional mastery doesn't exist in a vacuum. We live in relationship with others. And some of those others will test everything we've learned. We need to learn how to handle difficult people while staying centered. Moving to Chapter 12, Handling Difficult People, Staying Centered in Chaos. And if you're ready to release the weight of the past and forgive, not for them, but for you, hit subscribe. Every week, more practices for the person who's done carrying what isn't theirs. More tools for putting down the burden and walking free. You're not just learning about forgiveness. You're practicing it, one release at a time. Subscribe now. Freedom is waiting. Chapter 12 is Empathy and Compassion, Connecting Without Absorbing. Let me tell you about a beautiful gift that can become a dangerous curse. It's called empathy, the ability to feel what others feel, to understand their pain, to connect with their experience. It's what makes us human. It's what allows love, friendship, community. Without empathy, we're isolated islands. But without boundaries, empathy becomes emotional contagion. You don't just understand others' pain. You absorb it. You take it on. It becomes yours. And then you're not helping anyone. You're drowning right alongside them. You felt this. You talk to a friend who's anxious, and suddenly you're anxious. You spend time with a colleague who's angry, and you leave feeling angry. You sit with someone who's grieving, and you carry their grief for days. This is not compassion. This is fusion. You've lost the boundary between you and them. You're not supporting them. You're joining them in the storm. And now there are two drowning people instead of one. You can be a lighthouse without becoming the storm. Say that again. You can be a lighthouse without becoming the storm. A lighthouse doesn't stop the waves. It doesn't calm the wind. It stands firm on solid ground and casts light so others can navigate. It helps without being consumed. It connects without absorbing. That's the goal. That's the skill. Compassionate detachment. Compassionate detachment is the ability to care deeply without being consumed. To hold space for someone suffering without making it your own. To offer support while maintaining your own emotional stability. It's not coldness. It's not indifference. It's the opposite. It's sustainable compassion. The kind that can last a lifetime instead of burning out in a year. You have a choice. Absorb everyone's pain and drown. Or learn compassionate detachment and become a lighthouse. That's the key. Let's understand the distinction between empathy and compassion. Empathy is feeling with someone. It's resonance. When they're sad, you feel sad. When they're anxious, you feel anxious. Empathy is a gift. It allows connection. But without boundaries, it's a liability. You become an emotional sponge, soaking up everything around you. Compassion is the desire to help. It's action. It's seeing someone suffer and wanting to alleviate that suffering. Compassion doesn't require you to feel their pain. It requires you to care about their pain. The difference is subtle but critical. Empathy is feeling their emotions. Compassion is feeling for them. Empathy can burn you out. Compassion can sustain you. The goal is not to eliminate empathy. It's to balance it with boundaries. To feel with others without becoming them. To care deeply while staying grounded in your own center. You are strong. You are intelligent. You can learn this balance. Let me give you the practices for maintaining compassionate detachment. Practice 1. Visualize a protective bubble. Before entering a difficult conversation or spending time with someone who's struggling, take a moment to visualize a protective bubble around you. It's not a wall. You can still see, hear, and connect. But it filters what comes in. Only what's yours can enter. Their emotions stay with them. This simple visualization creates a boundary in your mind. It reminds you that you are separate. You can help without becoming. Practice 2. Ground yourself before and after. Before engaging with someone in pain, take a few deep breaths. Feel your feet on the floor. Remind yourself, I am here to help. Their emotions are theirs. Mine are mine. This grounds you in your own body and your own center. After the conversation, take a moment to reset. Shake out your hands. Take a walk. Do something that reminds you of your own life, your own body, your own emotions. This prevents absorption. Practice 3. Use the mantra. When you feel yourself starting to absorb someone else's emotion, silently repeat, Their emotions are theirs. Mine are mine. I can help without taking this on. This mantra reestablishes the boundary. It reminds you of the truth. Practice 4. Separate empathy from action. When someone shares their pain, you can acknowledge it without taking it on. That sounds incredibly hard. I'm here with you. You're not saying, I feel your pain. You're saying, I see your pain, and I'm present. That's enough. That's actually more helpful than drowning with them. Practice 5. Know your limits. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot help others if you're depleted. Know your limits. If you're already emotionally exhausted, it's okay to say, I can't be fully present for this right now. Can we talk tomorrow? This is not selfish. It's sustainable. You can be a lighthouse without becoming the storm. Let me give you a real-world example. Nina was a therapist. She'd chosen the profession because she genuinely cared about people. She wanted to help, and she was good at it. Too good, maybe. She'd sit with clients who'd experienced trauma, and she'd feel their pain as if it were her own. She'd carry their stories home. She'd lie awake thinking about them. After a few years, she was exhausted, depressed, and questioning her career. She learned about compassionate detachment. At first, it felt wrong. If I'm not feeling their pain, am I even helping? But she tried it. Before each session, she'd visualize her protective bubble. She'd ground herself in her body. She'd remind herself, their emotions are theirs. Mine are mine. I can help without taking this on. During sessions, she'd stay present and engaged, but she stopped absorbing. She could feel compassion without feeling their trauma. She could offer support without becoming depleted. After sessions, she'd reset. A walk, a few deep breaths, a reminder that she was in her own life, with her own emotions, separate from what she'd witnessed. Within months, Nina was transformed. She still cared deeply about her clients. She still did excellent work, but she no longer carried their pain home. She'd found the balance between empathy and boundaries. Nina became a lighthouse. The storm still came, but she stood firm, casting light without being consumed. You can do the same. It's not about not caring. It's about caring sustainably. Let's get practical. How do you apply this in everyday life? Scenario 1. A friend in crisis. Your friend calls, distraught about a breakup. You would dive into their pain, feel it with them, and then carry it for days. You takes a breath before answering. You listen. You acknowledge. That sounds incredibly painful. I'm so sorry you're going through this. You offer support, a listening ear, a distraction, a meal. But you don't take on their pain. You stay in your own body, your own life, your own center. Scenario 2. A stressed colleague. Your coworker is spiraling about a deadline, venting loudly, spreading anxiety through the office. You would catch that anxiety, feel it in your own chest, and join the spiral. You takes a breath. You acknowledge their stress. That sounds like a lot. You offer practical help if appropriate, but you don't absorb their panic. You stay grounded in your own work, your own timeline, your own calm. Scenario 3. A family member's drama. Your relative is embroiled in ongoing drama and wants to pull you in. They share every detail, expecting you to take sides, to feel their outrage. You would get sucked in, feeling angry on their behalf, taking on their battles. You listens with compassion, then stays out. That sounds really difficult. I hope you find a resolution. You don't take sides. You don't absorb the drama. You remain a lighthouse, not part of the storm. Scenario 4. Global tragedy. The news is full of suffering. Wars, disasters, injustice. You would absorb it all, feel helpless and overwhelmed, and eventually numb out. You acknowledges the pain without drowning in it. You feel compassion. You take action where you can, donate, volunteer, advocate. But you don't carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. You stay grounded in your own life, your own capacity, your own peace. You can be a lighthouse without becoming the storm. This is the practice, not indifference. Sustainable compassion, the kind that can last a lifetime. Your action protocol for this chapter. Step 1. Assess your absorption. Notice where you tend to absorb others' emotions. With certain people, in certain situations, after certain conversations. Just notice. Awareness is the first step. Step 2. Practice the bubble. Before any potentially draining interaction, take 10 seconds to visualize your protective bubble. See it clearly. Feel its presence. Let it remind you of your boundary. Step 3. Use the mantra. When you feel yourself starting to absorb, silently repeat. Their emotions are theirs. Mine are mine. I can help without taking this on. Let the words reestablish your center. Step 4. Reset afterward. After difficult conversations, take a moment to reset. Breathe. Move your body. Do something that reminds you of your own life. This prevents accumulation. Step 5. Check your capacity. Before agreeing to support someone, check in with yourself. Do you have the capacity right now? If not, it's okay to say, I want to be there for you. I'm not in a good place to do that right now. Can we talk tomorrow? This is not rejection. It's sustainability. You can be a lighthouse without becoming the storm. This is the truth. You can care deeply and stay separate. You can offer support and maintain boundaries. You can be present without being consumed. The world needs more lighthouses. People who can cast light into the darkness without being pulled into it. People who can hold space for suffering without drowning in it. People who can connect without absorbing. You can be that person. You can be a lighthouse. Now, with compassionate detachment as your practice, we must address one of the most challenging situations for emotional balance. Dealing with people who deliberately try to trigger you. The difficult ones. The ones who seem to know exactly which buttons to push. We need to learn how to handle difficult people while staying centered. Moving to Chapter 13. Handling difficult people, staying centered in chaos. And if you're ready to become a lighthouse, to care deeply without being consumed, hit subscribe. Every week, more practices for the person who wants to help without drowning. More tools for compassionate detachment. You're not just learning about boundaries, you're building them. One breath, one bubble, one mantra at a time. Subscribe now. Be the light. Moving over to Chapter 13. Handling difficult people, staying centered in chaos. There are people in this world who will try to trigger you. Some do it consciously. They know exactly which buttons to push. Some do it unconsciously. They're so lost in their own chaos that they spray it everywhere. Either way, the result is the same. You feel your peace slipping, your anger rising, your center shaken. You cannot control what they do. You can only control what you do. Say that again. You cannot control what they do. You can only control what you do. This is the foundation of handling difficult people. Not changing them. Not fixing them. Not winning against them. Just staying centered regardless of their behavior. Their power over you is not in what they do. It's in your reaction to what they do. Take away the reaction, and their power dissolves. You have a choice. Give them your peace every time they push. Or keep your peace, no matter what they do. That's the key. The goal is not to become a doormat. It's not to let people walk all over you. It's to respond from choice, not from reaction. It's to set boundaries calmly, firmly, without losing yourself in the process. Let's get practical. Here are specific strategies for handling difficult interactions. Strategy 1. Stay calm. This is the foundation. When someone is pushing your buttons, your first job is to keep your own nervous system regulated. Breathe. Feel your feet on the floor. Take a pause before responding. The calmer you are, the less power they have. Remember, their goal is to get a reaction. Don't give them one. Not because you're weak, because you're strong enough to choose. Strategy 2. Set clear boundaries. Difficult people often don't respect unspoken boundaries. You have to be clear, firm, direct. Use simple, unambiguous statements. I'm not willing to continue this conversation if you're going to yell. That topic is off limits. I need you to speak to me with respect. If this continues, I'm going to leave. Notice what these statements have in common. They're about you, what you're willing to do, what you'll accept. You're not controlling them. You're controlling your own presence. That's the only thing you can control. Strategy 3. Use I statements. When you need to express how someone's behavior affects you, use I statements. Not you always. Not you make me feel. That's blaming. That escalates. I feel disrespected when you interrupt me. I feel hurt by what you just said. I need some space right now. I statements express your experience without attacking. They're harder to argue with. They keep the focus on your feelings, not their flaws. Strategy 4. Avoid escalation. Difficult people often try to pull you into their emotional level. They raise their voice, so you raise yours. They get personal, so you get personal. They attack, so you defend. This is a trap. Don't match their energy. Stay at your level. If they shout, speak calmly. If they get personal, stay professional. If they attack, don't defend. Just state your boundary and disengage if needed. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. Strategy 5. Know when to disengage. Sometimes the only winning move is to leave. Not every situation can be resolved. Not every person can be reasoned with. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is remove yourself. I'm not going to continue this conversation right now. I'm going to take a break and we can talk later. I think it's best if we end this discussion. Disengaging is not losing. It's choosing your peace over their drama. Now, let me introduce you to a powerful technique for dealing with manipulative or toxic people. It's called the gray rock method. The idea is simple. You become as uninteresting as a gray rock. You give them nothing to work with. No emotion, no reaction, no engagement. Just boring, neutral, unreactive presence. Manipulative people feed on reaction. They need your anger, your fear, your frustration to fuel their behavior. When you give them nothing, they starve. They eventually lose interest and move on. How do you do it? Keep responses brief and neutral. Okay, I see. Thanks for letting me know. Don't share personal information. Keep conversations superficial. Don't react to their provocations. No matter what they say, stay flat. Don't explain, justify, or defend. Just be a gray rock. This is not about being cold or cruel. It's about protecting yourself from someone who will use any emotional opening to manipulate you. It's a survival strategy for dealing with people who cannot be reasoned with. You cannot control what they do. You can only control what you do. Let me give you a real-world example. David had a coworker, Lena, who loved drama. She'd stir up conflicts, spread gossip, and try to pull people into her orbit. She seemed to thrive on chaos. And she had a special interest in David, maybe because he was calm and she wanted to shake him. At first, David reacted. He'd defend himself. He'd explain. He'd get frustrated. This only fueled Lena. She'd found a source of reaction, and she kept coming back. Then David learned about the gray rock method. The next time Lena tried to provoke him, he stayed flat. Okay, I see. No emotion. No engagement. No reaction. Lena tried harder. Nothing. She escalated. Still nothing. After a few weeks, she lost interest. David wasn't feeding her anymore. She moved on to someone who would. David didn't change Lena. He changed his response. And that changed everything. You can do the same. It's not about changing them. It's about not being changed by them. Let's go through more scenarios. Scenario 1. The critic. Someone constantly criticizes you, your work, your choices, your character. Old you would defend, explain, get angry. New you pauses, breathes, then says calmly, I appreciate your perspective. I'll consider it. And moves on. You don't need their approval. You don't need to convince them. You just need to stay centered. Scenario 2. The victim. Someone who always plays the victim, blaming everyone else for their problems, trying to pull you into their drama. Old you would try to help, solve their problems, get drawn in. New you listens with compassion, then stays out. That sounds really hard. I hope you find a solution. You don't take on their problems. You don't get sucked into their vortex. Scenario 3. The aggressor. Someone who attacks directly, yelling, blaming, threatening. Old you would match their energy, escalate the conflict. New you stays calm, breathes, sets a boundary. I'm not willing to be spoken to that way. We can talk when you're calm. If they continue, you disengage. You leave. You protect your peace. Scenario 4. The manipulator. Someone who uses guilt, flattery, or emotional appeals to get what they want. Old you would give in, feel guilty, try to please. New you sees the manipulation for what it is. You stay neutral. You don't react. You make decisions based on your own values, not their pressure. Gray rock. Uninteresting. Unmoved. Scenario 5. The chronic complainer. Someone who constantly complains about everything, dragging you into their negative spiral. Old you would join them, feel drained, absorb their negativity. New you listens briefly, then redirects. That sounds frustrating. Anyway, I wanted to ask you about. You don't feed the negativity. You don't let it become yours. You cannot control what they do. You can only control what you do. This is the mantra. When you're in the middle of a difficult interaction, repeat it to yourself. I cannot control them. I can only control me. Let it ground you. Let it remind you where your power really lies. Your action protocol for this chapter. Step 1. Identify your difficult people. Who in your life consistently triggers you? Make a list. Just noticing is the first step. You can't prepare for what you don't acknowledge. Step 2. Choose your strategy. For each person, decide which strategy will serve you best. Staying calm, setting boundaries, using I statements, gray rock, disengaging, have a plan before you need it. Step 3. Practice in low-stakes situations. You can't learn to handle difficult people in a crisis. Practice on minor annoyances. The pushy salesperson, the rude customer, the mildly annoying acquaintance. Each interaction is a rep. Step 4. Use the mantra. In the moment, when you feel yourself getting triggered, repeat, I cannot control them. I can only control me. Let it center you. Let it remind you of your power. Step 5. Debrief afterward. After a difficult interaction, take a moment to reflect. What worked? What didn't? What will you do differently next time? This is how you learn and grow. You cannot control what they do. You can only control what you do. This is the truth that sets you free. Free from trying to change people who don't want to change. Free from the exhausting quest to make everyone understand you. Free from giving your peace away to anyone who demands it. Your peace is yours. It's not negotiable. It's not for sale. And no one can take it without your permission. You are the master of your own world, not theirs. You don't need their permission to stay calm. You don't need their cooperation to set boundaries. You don't need their approval to disengage. You just need to remember, you cannot control them. You can only control you. And you are strong enough to do that. Now, with these strategies for handling difficult people, we have one final step. All these practices, the pause, the breath, the reframing, the self-compassion, the gratitude, the resilience, the forgiveness, the boundaries, they're not just techniques. They're the building blocks of a new way of living. We need to bring it all together. We need to build your personal practice. Moving to Chapter 14, building your personal practice, making it stick. And if you're ready to stop giving your peace away to difficult people and start staying centered no matter what, hit subscribe. Every week, more strategies for the person who's done being triggered. More tools for keeping your calm when others lose theirs. You're not just learning about handling difficult people. You're building the muscle. One interaction at a time. Subscribe now. Your peace is waiting. Coming over to Chapter 14, that is, building your personal practice, making it stick. Let me tell you about the difference between knowing and doing. You know how to eat healthy. You know how to exercise. You know how to save money. You know how to be patient. Knowing isn't the problem. The problem is doing. Consistently. Day after day. When it's easy and when it's hard. When you're motivated and when you're not. This book has given you 13 chapters of knowledge. The science. The techniques. The strategies. You know about the reactive trap. You know about the pause. You know about the breath. You know about reframing. You know about self-compassion. You know about gratitude. You know about resilience. You know about forgiveness. You know about boundaries. Knowledge is not transformation. Practice is transformation. Reading about emotional control is like reading about physical fitness. You can read 100 books about running. You still have to put on your shoes and run. The books don't run for you. The knowledge doesn't make you fit. Only the practice does. Practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. Say that again. Practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. Whatever you practice, you become. If you practice reacting, you become a reactor. If you practice pausing, you become someone who pauses. If you practice self-criticism, you become a self-critic. If you practice self-compassion, you become your own ally. The question is not what you know. The question is what you practice. You have a choice. Stay at the level of knowledge and wonder why nothing changes. Or commit to practice and become someone new. That's the key. Let's design your personal practice. This is not complicated. It's just consistent. The morning check-in. Before the day grabs you, take 2 minutes to check in with yourself. Sit quietly. Take a few breaths. Ask yourself, how am I feeling right now? What emotions are present? What's my intention for today? What practice do I want to remember? This is not about fixing anything. It's about awareness. It's about setting your compass before the storms come. 2 minutes. That's all. Pause drills throughout the day. You can't practice emotional control only in the morning. You need reps throughout the day. Use the small moments. When your phone buzzes, pause before checking it. When you're about to speak, pause before the words come out. When you feel a flicker of frustration, pause and breathe. When you're waiting in line, pause and feel your feet. These micro pauses are your reps. They take seconds. They build the muscle. 10, 20, 50 times a day. Each one is a small victory. The evening reflection. At the end of each day, take 5 minutes to reflect. Not to judge, to learn. Ask yourself, What triggered me today? How did I handle it? What could I do differently next time? What's one thing I did well? This is not about beating yourself up. It's about gathering data. You can't improve what you don't notice. The evening reflection turns your day into a learning opportunity. The weekly review. Once a week, take a longer look. 15 minutes. Ask yourself, what patterns am I noticing? What situations consistently trigger me? What practices are working? What do I need to focus on next week? This is your strategic check-in. It keeps you from getting lost in the day-to-day. It helps you see the bigger picture of your growth. Track progress, not perfection. Here's where most people quit. They expect to be perfect immediately. They have one reactive moment and decide the whole practice is a failure. This is nonsense. You're not aiming for perfection. You're aiming for progress. For noticing. For trying again. Track the small wins. Not the big transformations. The tiny moments of victory. I paused for 3 seconds before responding. I didn't snap at my kid. I took a breath instead of sending that email. I noticed I was triggered and named the emotion. I practiced self-compassion when I messed up. These are your reps. Celebrate them. Not with a parade. Just with acknowledgement. Good job. That was a win. This positive reinforcement builds the neural pathway. It makes you want to keep practicing. Practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. Let me give you a real-world example. Tara was a high-strung executive. She'd read all the books on emotional intelligence. She could explain the concepts perfectly, but in the moment, she still reacted, still snapped, still spiraled. The knowledge hadn't translated. She decided to build a practice. Every morning, 2 minutes of check-in. Throughout the day, pause drills, before emails, before meetings, before responding. Every evening, 5 minutes of reflection. Every Sunday, a weekly review. At first, it felt forced, artificial. She forgot half the time, but she kept at it. After a few weeks, something shifted. The pauses started happening automatically. She'd catch herself before snapping. She'd notice the trigger before the reaction. The evening reflections showed her patterns she'd never seen. After a few months, her colleagues noticed. You seem different, they said. Calmer. Tara didn't feel like a different person. She just felt like herself, but with more space. More choice. More peace. Tara didn't become perfect. She still had reactive moments, but they were fewer, and she recovered faster. The practice was working. You can do the same. It's not about never reacting. It's about building the practice. Let's get practical. How do you build your practice starting today? Step 1. Start small. Don't try to do everything at once. Pick one practice. Just one. Morning check-ins. Or pause drills. Or evening reflections. Commit to that one practice for 1 week. That's it. Build the habit before you add more. Step 2. Use anchors. Link your practice to existing habits. Morning coffee equals check-in. Before meals equals pause drill. Brushing teeth equals evening reflection. Sunday morning coffee equals weekly review. Anchors make the new habit stick. Step 3. Forgive the misses. You will miss days. You will forget. You will slip. That's okay. It's not failure. It's part of the process. Forgive yourself and continue. The goal is not perfection. The goal is consistency over time. Step 4. Track your wins. Get a notebook or a note on your phone. Each day, write down one small win. Just one. I paused before responding to my boss. I noticed I was getting triggered and took a breath. I was kind to myself after a mistake. This builds momentum. Step 5. Review and adjust. Each week, look at your practice. What's working? What's not? Do you need to adjust? Maybe morning check-ins aren't your thing. Try evening instead. Maybe pause drills feel forced. Try a different trigger. The practice serves you. You don't serve the practice. Practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. This is the truth. Whatever you practice, you become. If you practice reacting, you become a reactor. If you practice pausing, you become someone who pauses. If you practice self-criticism, you become a self-critic. If you practice self-compassion, you become your own ally. The choice is yours. Not just today. Every day. Every moment. Every rep. Think about where you want to be a year from now. What kind of person do you want to be? Calmer? More centered? Less reactive? More at peace? That person is not created by reading. That person is created by practicing. One day at a time. One rep at a time. One small win at a time. You have everything you need. The knowledge is in these chapters. The techniques are in your mind. The only thing missing is the practice. Start today, not tomorrow, not Monday, not next month. Today. Take 2 minutes this morning to check in with yourself. Set your intention. Today I will practice the pause. Throughout the day, when you feel the urge to react, pause. Just for a breath. That's a rep. Tonight, take 5 minutes to reflect. What triggered you? How did you handle it? What's one thing you did well? That's day 1. Then day 2. Then day 3. A year from now, you'll look back and see someone transformed. Not by magic, by practice. Practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. Let me give you one more story. James was a retired teacher who'd struggled with anger his whole life. He'd read countless books, tried therapy, attended workshops. Nothing stuck. He'd given up on changing. Then he heard about the idea of practice. Not perfection, just practice. He started small. Every morning, he'd sit with his coffee and check in. How am I feeling? What's my intention today? Every evening, he'd reflect. What triggered me? How did I handle it? He kept a notebook of small wins. I paused before yelling at the TV. I took a breath when the neighbor's dog barked. I noticed I was getting angry and named it. After a year, James wasn't a different person. He was still James, but he had more space, more choice, more peace. The practice had made permanent not perfection, but progress. James discovered what you're discovering now. Transformation is not an event. It's a practice. It's showing up day after day, even when it's boring, even when it's hard, even when you don't feel like it. Your action protocol for this chapter. Step 1. Choose one practice. Morning check-in. Pause drills. Evening reflection. Weekly review. Pick one. Commit to it for 1 week. Step 2. Set your anchor. Link your practice to something you already do. Coffee, lunch, bedtime, Sunday morning. Make it automatic. Step 3. Start your win log. Get a notebook. Each day, write down one small win. Just one. Celebrate it. Let it fuel you. Step 4. Forgive and continue. When you miss a day, and you will, forgive yourself. Don't quit. Just start again tomorrow. The only failure is stopping. Step 5. Keep going. A week becomes a month. A month becomes a year. A year becomes a lifetime. Keep going. The practice is the point. Practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. This is the final truth. Not that you'll never react again. Not that you'll be perfectly calm forever. Just that who you are is what you practice. So practice wisely. You are the master of your own practice. You get to choose what you become. One rep at a time. One day at a time. One choice at a time. Now, with your practice in place, we arrive at the final chapter. The place where all these lessons come together. The vision of what's possible when you master the power of not reacting. Moving to chapter 15, the liberated life, living from choice, not reaction. And if you're ready to stop knowing and start doing, hit subscribe. Every week, more practices for the person who's done reading and ready to become. More tools for building the muscle of emotional mastery. You're not just learning, you're practicing. One rep at a time. Subscribe now. The practice is waiting. It's time for our last chapter, chapter 15, the liberated life, living from choice, not reaction. Let me tell you about the destination. Not a place, a way of being. A life where you are no longer at the mercy of every trigger. Where you move through the world with intention, clarity, and peace. Where reactions are rare and responses are chosen. Where your emotional world is your own and no one else holds the keys. This is the liberated life. This is what all the practice has been for. Not perfection. Not never feeling anger, fear, or sadness. Not becoming a robot. Just freedom. Freedom from the automatic. Freedom from the hijack. Freedom from giving your peace away to anyone who demands it. Your peace is not negotiable. Your reactions are your choice. Say that again. Your peace is not negotiable. Your reactions are your choice. This is the ultimate freedom. Knowing that no one can take your peace without your permission. You are the gatekeeper of your own emotional world. And you have the power. Let me show you what this looks like in real life. Stronger relationships. When you're no longer at the mercy of every trigger, your relationships transform. Instead of lashing out when your partner says something that stings, you pause. You breathe. You respond from your values, not your wounds. Instead of getting defensive when a friend gives feedback, you listen. You consider. You learn. The people in your life feel the difference. They feel safer with you. They trust you more. They know that you won't explode, won't shut down, won't make everything about you. You become someone they can count on, even in hard conversations. Better decisions. When you're not reacting, you can think. You can access your prefrontal cortex, the wise, choosing part of your brain. Instead of firing off an angry email, you wait and write a better one later. Instead of making an impulsive purchase to feel better, you pause and consider your real needs. Instead of saying yes to something you'll regret, you take time to check with yourself. Your decisions become aligned with your values, not your emotions. You move through life with intention, not impulse. Less stress. When you're not reacting to every little thing, your nervous system gets a break. The constant flood of cortisol slows. Your body stops living in emergency mode. You sleep better. You feel calmer. You have more energy for what actually matters. The things that used to ruin your day, the rude comment, the slow driver, the unexpected change, become minor inconveniences instead of major crises. You let them go. You move on. You save your energy for what deserves it. More joy. When you're not caught in reactivity, you're available for what's good. You can be fully present with the people you love. You can notice the small beauties, a sunset, a laugh, a good meal. You can experience joy without waiting for the other shoe to drop. Joy lives in the present moment. Reactivity lives in the past and future. When you're free from reactivity, you can actually be here, now, for your life. The ultimate freedom. No one can take your peace without your permission. This is the truth that sets you free. Not that the world will stop triggering you. It won't. People will still be difficult. Situations will still be hard. Life will still throw curveballs. But none of it can take your peace without your consent. You are the gatekeeper. You decide what gets in. You decide what stays. You decide what you carry and what you release. Your peace is not negotiable. Your reactions are your choice. Let me give you a real-world example. Marcus had been practicing for 2 years. 2 years of morning check-ins. 2 years of pause drills. 2 years of evening reflections. 2 years of tracking small wins. He wasn't perfect. He still reacted sometimes. But the gap was wider. The recovery was faster. The peace was deeper. Then came the test. His company was acquired, and his position was eliminated. 20 years of work, gone in a meeting. The old Marcus would have spiraled. Anger at the company. Fear about the future. Shame about losing his job. Days, maybe weeks, of reactivity. The new Marcus felt the surge. The heat in his chest. The racing thoughts. And then he paused. He breathed. He felt his feet on the floor. He named the emotion. Fear. Anger. Disappointment. He validated it. It makes sense to feel this way. He didn't suppress. He didn't explode. He just let the wave move through. Within an hour, he was thinking clearly. Not happy, still hurting, but clear. He could assess his options. He could reach out to his network. He could make a plan. The crisis didn't destroy him. It was just another wave to ride. Marcus discovered what you're discovering now. The liberated life is not a life without pain. It's a life where pain doesn't own you. It's not about never struggling. It's about struggling from a place of choice. Let me give you another example. Nadia had been practicing for years. She'd worked through childhood trauma, difficult relationships, career setbacks. She'd built a practice that sustained her. Then her daughter was diagnosed with a serious illness. The old Nadia would have collapsed, overwhelmed by fear and grief, unable to function, lost in the storm. The new Nadia felt the fear deeply. She didn't numb it or push it away. She also felt the grief. She let it be there. And then, from that place of feeling, she acted. She researched treatments. She advocated for her daughter. She leaned on her support network. She took care of herself so she could take care of her child. The fear didn't disappear. The grief didn't vanish. But they didn't paralyze her. She moved through them. She made choices. She was present for her daughter in a way that only someone who has done their own work can be. Nadia's life wasn't free from pain. It was free from being destroyed by pain. That's the liberated life. Your peace is not negotiable. Your reactions are your choice. This is not about never feeling. It's about never being owned by what you feel. It's about having emotions without being had by them. It's about riding the waves instead of drowning in them. Think about what this means for your future. 6 months from now, with consistent practice, you'll notice the gaps getting wider, the pauses getting longer, the recoveries getting faster. A year from now, people will notice. You seem different, they'll say. Calmer. You'll realize you haven't had a major reactive episode in weeks. 5 years from now, you'll look back at who you were and barely recognize yourself. Not because you've become someone else, Because you've become more fully yourself. The real you, underneath all the reactivity. Calm, clear, free. This is not fantasy. This is what practice does. This is what's possible. You have a choice. Stay where you are, at the mercy of every trigger. Or commit to the practice and become someone new. That's the key. Let me give you the final practice. The one that ties everything together. Step 1. Remember your power. Every morning, remind yourself, my peace is not negotiable. My reactions are my choice. This is your anchor, your compass, your truth. Step 2. Pause before every response. No matter what happens, before you respond, pause. Even for a breath, even for a second, create the gap. In that gap is your freedom. Step 3. Choose your response. From the gap, choose. Not from habit, not from fear, not from anger, from your values, from your highest self, from choice. Step 4. Release what's not yours. At the end of each day, let go of what you don't need to carry. The insults, the frustrations, the small indignities. They're not yours. Release them. Step 5. Keep practicing. Not because you're not there yet, because practice is the point. The liberated life is not a destination. It's a way of moving through the world. A continuous practice of choosing peace over reaction, response over reflex, freedom over bondage. Your peace is not negotiable. Your reactions are your choice. This is the truth that has set countless people free. It will set you free too. Not because the world will stop testing you. It won't. Not because you'll never feel anger or fear again. You will. But because you'll know, deep in your bones, that you are the one in charge. Not your amygdala. Not your triggers. Not the people who push your buttons. You. You are the master of your own emotional world. You always were. You just forgot. Now you remember. Now, let's bring it all together. One final time. Chapter 1. The Reactive Trap. You learn that your amygdala hijacks you in milliseconds. That reaction is automatic. Response is chosen. And between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is your power. In Chapter 2, The Science of Emotion, you learn that emotions are data, not enemies. That they're chemistry, not character. That 90 seconds is all it takes for the chemical wave to pass. Feel it for 90 seconds. Then let it go. During Chapter 3, The Pause, you learn that the pause is your most powerful tool. That counting, breathing, feeling your feet, these micro-practices are neurological circuit breakers. The pause is not weakness. It's the ultimate strength. Chapter 4, Mindfulness. You learn that you are not your thoughts or feelings. You are the observer of them. You are the sky, not the weather. You are not the storm. You are the sky that holds it. In Chapter 5, Breathing, you learn that your breath is the body's emergency brake. Box breathing, extended exhale, physiological sigh. When in doubt, breathe. Your nervous system is listening. Chapter 6, The Stories We Tell Ourselves. You learn that it's not the event that triggers you. It's the story you tell yourself about it. Don't believe everything you think. Your thoughts are not facts. Chapter 7, Emotional Balance. You learn that balance is not the absence of emotion. It's riding the wave instead of being crushed by it. Feel it. Name it. Release it. During Chapter 8, Self-Compassion, you learn that most people react because they're at war with themselves. Self-compassion ends the war. Be the friend to yourself that you've always needed. Chapter 9 was Gratitude, and you learn that gratitude rewires the brain for positivity. It's not about what you have. It's about what you notice. Chapter 10, Emotional Resilience. You learn that resilience is not about never falling. It's about how quickly you get up. Chapter 11, Forgiveness. You learn that forgiveness is for you, not them. It's giving up the hope that the past could be any different. In Chapter 12, Empathy and Compassion, you learn that you can care deeply without being consumed. You can be a lighthouse without becoming the storm. Chapter 13, Handling Difficult People. You learn that you cannot control what they do. You can only control what you do. During Chapter 14, Building Your Personal Practice, you learn that reading is not enough. Practice is everything. Practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. And now, Chapter 15, The Liberated Life. You've arrived, not at a destination, at a way of being. Your peace is not negotiable. Your reactions are your choice. This is your truth. Live it. The path is before you. The tools are in your hands. The practice is waiting. Go. Live your liberated life. And if this journey has changed the way you see yourself and your emotions, hit subscribe. Not because you need another book to read, because you need a practice to sustain. Every week, more reminders, more tools, more community for the person who's chosen the liberated life. Your peace is not negotiable. Your subscription is your choice. Make it now. The practice continues. You began this journey caught in the reactive trap, triggered, overwhelmed, at the mercy of every provocation. Now you know the truth. You are not your emotions. You are the observer of your emotions. And between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is your freedom. You have learned the science. You have learned the techniques. The pause, the breath, the reframe, the self-compassion, the gratitude, the resilience, the forgiveness, the boundaries. These are not just ideas. They are tools. And tools only work if you use them. So here is your challenge. Your only challenge. For the next 7 days, you will run the reaction detox. Before you respond to any trigger, any frustration, any criticism, any disappointment, you will pause. You will take one breath. You will ask yourself, what response serves my peace? Just 7 days. Just one breath. Just one question. You will slip. You will react. That's okay. Forgive yourself and continue. This is not about perfection. It's about practice. Because the person who masters their reactions masters their life. And that person is you. The power of not reacting is now yours. Go, live it, and be free. And if this journey toward emotional mastery resonated with you, hit subscribe. It's a small act of intention, a choice to keep learning, keep growing, keep practicing. Every week, more tools for the person you're becoming. No pressure, just practice. Together,